What's up, everyone? Omnisensei here with What If I Was Reborn in The Walking Dead as a Spec Ops soldier before the zombie apocalypse? Part 5. If you enjoy this content, please smash the like button. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description. I hope you enjoy listening to it. Minutes later, Daryl was sliding across the bar floor from one side to the other, cursing under his breath. He threw some empty wine bottles onto the counter beside him and shouted, "Shane, who are those bastards?" "And you, old man, someone died while we were trying to find you. Don't you feel even a little guilty?" "Hey! Stop talking to my father like that." Seeing Herschel remain silent, Beth couldn't help but snap when she heard Daryl's cruel words. She turned to face him with red-rimmed eyes, overwhelmed by everything that had happened. Daryl took a few steps forward, looking at the girl in front of him. Anger surged from within, and he shouted, pointing at Herschel, "Did I say something wrong, girl? Don't forget that we're in this damn mess because of him." "Hey! Daryl, stop talking. Can't you see the situation is already bad enough?" Laurie quickly grabbed Daryl's hand, sensing he was losing control, but he yanked it away forcefully. Pointing at Laurie, Daryl cursed as well. "Isn't this your fault too, Laurie? You're a woman who still hasn't accepted the world for what it is. The one time you tried to do something on your own, you went out looking for death. Jason said that many in the community wouldn't understand the gravity of the world we live in, and now I think I finally understand his words." Laurie fell silent at Daryl's accusations. Her lips trembled, but she knew she couldn't say anything to defend herself. "Let's stay quiet for a minute. This is not the time to argue. Do you really think now is the right time to fight among ourselves?" Shane finally spoke, having been tending to Richard's wounds, stopping the escalating conflict. Like everyone else, his mind was paralyzed in the moment. Jimmy's death, Richard's serious injury, and now the team constantly arguing instead of focusing on the danger outside. During their meetings, Jason had warned them that something like this was only a matter of time. That's why no one without experience was ever supposed to leave the prison under any circumstances. Everyone had agreed that only military personnel and elite fighters would handle outside missions, while the others managed the refuge. Considering the situation now, they all needed to calm down and think carefully about how to deal with the problem at hand. Suddenly, as everyone was lost in thought, Herschel, who had been sitting at the bar's edge, stood up. He slowly walked over to Richard and, without saying a word, began examining his wound. Seeing this, Shane also moved and observed the outside situation through the gaps in the bar's door and windows. Suddenly, he felt someone approaching behind him, and when he turned around, Daryl was at his side. "Before they started shooting, I saw at least 2 people on the rooftop to the right, over there." After saying that, Daryl pointed toward a building where he had last seen the enemy. Shane turned his head in the direction Daryl indicated, and sure enough, a dark shadow could be seen lying in that spot. "This is bad. We have no idea how many people are on the enemy's side." Shane looked away and slammed his fist against the wooden floor, venting his frustration. "We need to contact the prison. Sam should be able to send a team to support us. Where's the radio?" Morgan suddenly came up with a logical idea and looked at Shane for the radio. "The radio is here." Glenn, who had been in a corner, stepped forward with a backpack and handed it over. Daryl snatched it from him. Noticing Glenn had been hiding in the corner, Daryl glared at him and said, "Are you scared? You should be thinking about how to take down our enemies. Stop hiding." "It was shocking, but I'm not scared." Glenn sat beside Daryl, repeating the words in his mind. With a look of disdain, Daryl ignored him, took out the radio, and started communicating with the prison. "ZZ. This is Daryl. Do you copy? Over. ZZ. ZZ. Daryl speaking to the prison. Can anyone hear me? Respond. We're in a crisis situation. Over. ZZ. After multiple attempts to contact the prison, there was no response. Daryl, disappointed, tossed the radio back to Glenn. The Walker horde didn't attack the prison, did it? Glenn asked in a low voice. Shut the hell up. Why are you thinking something so stupid? Daryl briefly imagined the prison overrun with walkers. That's impossible. The prison has tanks, they can't be taken down by a horde that easily. Morgan tried to reassure them, but the truth was, he had no solid answer to counter Glenn's words. Shane covered his face with his hands, filled with desperation. Even though he had led a group before, he now had 3 women with him, an old man, an injured person, and one who was already dead. In the end, only he, Daryl, Morgan, and Glenn had combat skills. Shane had a few capable people, but that wasn't the issue. The real problem was that they had no information on the enemy. Without intel and in a disadvantageous position, the outcome would always be bad for them. Everyone sat on the floor, still unsure of how to get out of their situation. Aside from the walkers, there was another threat targeting their lives. Shane patted his face a few times, and with renewed confidence, he stood up. Looking at the people in the room, he hesitated for a moment before saying, the enemy outside could come in at any moment. We can't just sit here and wait for death, we have to make a run for it. Staying here will only prolong our deaths. Wouldn't most of us die if we ran? Glenn asked, unwilling to accept what Shane was saying. He still wanted to reunite with Maggie. As a leader who had to make decisions no one else dared to, Shane nodded and didn't deny Glenn's words. You're right. I really don't want to admit it, but that's the truth. If we run, we have a chance. Staying here and doing nothing is worse. After a pause, seeing that no one else had anything to say, Shane made his decision and thought of the best way to escape. All right, everyone get ready to run, this will be our only chance. Just as everyone was grabbing their things, Glenn suddenly shouted, Wait, everyone! Maybe no one else has to die. Everyone turned toward Glenn, who was holding the radio. A sound could now be heard coming from the speaker. ZZ. Anyone from the SCT community who hears my voice, respond immediately. The group of people who had been saying their goodbyes instantly smiled, and Shane quickly snatched the radio from their hands. ZZ. This is Shane. I hear you loud and clear. ZZ. Shane, what a surprise. We're on our way back right now. How's everything at the prison with the Walker horde? Hearing that question, Shane let out a helpless smile and replied with a grin, ZZ. Jason, sorry, but we're not at the prison. Someone ambushed us, and we're under attack. Luckily, we managed to take shelter in a bar. The radio fell silent for a few seconds, and then Jason's voice came through again, this time tinged with a perceptible coldness. ZZ. Where are you? Shane looked at Herschel and the others, and Beth, who was beside him, quickly said, This is the closest town south of the prison. There shouldn't be any other towns nearby. ZZ. We're in the most isolated town south of the prison, inside a bar. There was another silence, lasting nearly a minute. Shane assumed the other party was quickly checking the map, and sure enough, a moment later, Jason's voice came back over the radio. ZZ. Got it. Hold your position and try not to leave the bar. We'll be there in 10 minutes. ZZ. Understood. After setting the radio aside, everyone in the group let out a sigh of relief, and Shane quickly surveyed the area. Within minutes, he began giving orders, positioning people in advantageous spots while instructing the rest to hide with Richard. A few minutes later, footsteps could be heard outside the bar. Shane raised his hand, signaling everyone to stay alert, while carefully peering outside through a small gap. He could now clearly see 5 or 6 people approaching the bar, carrying long guns in their hands. Shane couldn't afford to let the enemies get close to the bar so easily. If they managed to enter, things would turn bad for everyone. With a determined mindset, Shane raised his M4, aimed at the closest person, and pulled the trigger. You're surrounded. Come out now and hand over the women. Bang! 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 Of the few people approaching, 2 were hit by the burst of gunfire and collapsed to the ground. The rest, unwilling to remain in the open, quickly ran for cover in different directions. A man's voice echoed from behind a dumpster. "Listen up, you bastards inside. You're all dead. I'm going to take the women from your group and show them a good time. But before that, I'll catch every single one of you and slit your throats one by one." Hearing the threats from outside, Shane felt somewhat relieved. As long as the enemy knew they had weapons to fight back, it wouldn't be easy for them to get anywhere near the bar. At this moment, after placing the radio on his vest, Jason looked at everyone in the bus crowd and slowly prepared the words he wanted to express. During this time, he knew that this new group of survivors was truly exceptional. There were experienced soldiers, police officers, and skilled firefighters. There were even doctors, which was highly beneficial for the community. Jason, standing before everyone, silently observed the numerous somewhat dejected faces and said, "My community and all the people protected by soldiers, good police officers, scientists, doctors, and civilians fight every day to welcome more people from the outside. No one will be expelled from our refuge, and all will be welcome. But you must know from experience that there are people who want to destroy the refuge we are building with great effort, a home for children and the elderly who only seek to live their first and last days in peace. That's why I need your help. We must take up arms and fight." As he spoke, he pointed to the wound on his shoulder and said in a powerful voice, "Look at this wound. I received it while trying, in good faith, to save a civilian." Needless to say, they don't seek to be saved. And now the moment has come for you to decide, will you move forward and fight against those who want to see us perish, or will you just stand aside and watch? Looking at everyone's expressions, Jason understood that his words had influenced them. There was no hesitation, and even the elderly felt emboldened. Whether it was Jim or Kenneth, who had been saved by Jason, the soldiers that Elias had rescued from the clutches of those survivors, or the civilians helped along the way to this place, they all held weapons, ready to face the world. We will kill whoever is necessary to save those who want to be saved. I would like to believe that there are more good people than bad in this world, but right now, the situation is telling me otherwise. I will create a new world and teach all of you how to survive. I won't deny that we will encounter obstacles along the way, but I assure you, this will only be the beginning of a new order. Seeing that Carlos had his mouth open but seemed to be thinking that he could do nothing, Jason was truly intrigued by him. Lowering his weapon temporarily, he took a step forward and said, "The cure for this virus has not been found by our community's researchers, and it very likely never will be." When Carlos heard Jason's words, he still couldn't believe it. After thinking for a moment, he realized what Jason was truly telling them and said, "If that's how it is, I'm ready to fight by your side to hold on to the little world we have left. I admit I still have some fear of the walkers, but I assure you that at some point, I will be ready to protect what little remains for us." That's what I like to hear. And as long as we keep fighting, there will be a path to a better future. Seeing Carlos' remarkable words, Jason felt truly satisfied. He raised his hand and pointed to a box behind the group. Inside that box are weapons and ammunition. Soldiers, distribute a weapon to everyone for self-defense. You won't have to fight, but if you need to protect yourselves from what we cannot shield you from, you will know what to do. Then, he turned his head toward George Bercier and asked, "How much time do we have left before we reach the group under attack?" "At least 5 minutes, sir, no more," George Bercier responded with a cold expression. "Good." Hearing George's answer, Jason nodded with satisfaction. If they were still too far away, he would be truly anxious about what might happen to Shane's group, who were inexplicably outside the prison. "Sir, should we eliminate all the enemies outside?" A soldier approached Jason, wearing a characteristic green uniform, and asked with a calm gaze. "Yes, no one outside should be left alive. They are possibly gang members or groups like the ones we encountered in Atlanta, so we must show no mercy," Jason expressed his thoughts naturally. "Understood, sir." Jason nodded and approached Daniel, who was sitting with the other civilians, and said, "This time, you'll be in charge of the convoy's security. Leave the rest to us." As if thinking of something, Kenneth looked at Jason and said, "We will take care of keeping this place safe. But sir, if I may say, if situations like this arise again, you can count on Jim and me." Jason patted Kenneth's shoulder and nodded. He then walked over to George Bercier, who was driving at high speed, and picked up the radio as he contacted Shane. "ZZ. Shane, what's your situation?" "We'll be there in less than 3 minutes. ZZ. We're holding out, but we won't last long in this disadvantageous position, Jason. You should know there are a lot of enemy fighters. You have to be careful, some of them are on the roof. ZZ. Don't worry, we have plenty of people too." In the bar, Shane put the radio aside again and started to savor what was about to unfold, occasionally glancing at the dumpster. Deep down, he was eager to take down that bastard hiding like a rat. Since becoming a police officer in King County, he had never been in such a complicated situation as this. Even when Rick was wounded, it was nothing compared to now. With deep resentment and anger, he killed one of the men outside. From time to time, Shane fired toward the dumpster to suppress the enemies. 3 minutes might not seem like much in this situation, but it was definitely not enough. Right after Shane fired a few more rounds, the roar of numerous vehicles was heard in the distance. Not even a second later, the people inside the bar heard bursts upon bursts of gunfire not far from their position. Boom! Bang! 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 It's the military! Many of the trucks advanced forward, followed by a series of rapid gunfire exchanges, continuous bursts firing from all directions. Although Shane couldn't clearly see what was happening around him, he was sure there were people hiding behind the dumpster. But at that moment, several men in green military uniforms advanced with their weapons raised. Behind them, Jason walked calmly. "Jason is here. Let's move out now." Shane rushed out of the bar only to see Jason turning around and walking toward it, followed by several unfamiliar figures. There were more than 30 men dressed in black and green uniforms. They were definitely military. Shane looked closer and realized they were all wearing army uniforms. Observing the military ranks of these people, some were higher than others. But Shane couldn't look any longer. Jason had already reached the bar's entrance, and Jimmy's body lay there, making Jason's face darken. "I want the ones who are still alive here," Jason shouted with a voice full of authority. Elias and Rick, along with another pair of soldiers, slowly approached while holding 2 people. "Move, damn it!" In a matter of moments, 2 people were thrown in front of Jason. Without wasting time, he drew his weapon and looked at them with a calm gaze. With weak legs, the men kneeling on the ground looked at Jason with a complicated expression. Their cloaks lay on the floor as they breathed in an unnatural rhythm. "R.A." But just as they were about to scream with their mouths open, Jason ejected the pistol's magazine, then shoved the entire barrel into the mouth of the kneeling man. He lifted his leg and kicked the man in the chest. The body immediately fell backward, the back of the strong man's head slamming hard against the ground. His entire body went limp, lying motionless on the floor. This scene happened swiftly and brutally. The people behind Jason were left stunned, but when they saw his gaze, their slightly trembling bodies felt a chill, and no one dared to make a sound. As the seconds passed, Jason turned his gaze to the thin man beneath him, who was already turning purple and seemed about to die. He released his grip on his neck before striking him with the butt of his pistol. Crack! Cough, cough, cough. The thin man's body went still on the ground, his breathing becoming more labored. He clutched his neck and took a deep breath, though he wasn't fully conscious, then coughed repeatedly due to the pain. "Hey, your turn will come too, so start thinking of a special way for me to let you go." Jason turned to the other man beside him, who was trembling in terror at the sight of how his companion was being treated. Tapping the forehead of the thin man beneath him, Jason asked calmly, "Give me what I want, or you won't be so lucky next time." How many accomplices do you have, and where are they hiding? I cough. I don't know. Thanks for your answer. Receiving an answer he didn't want, Jason aimed his silenced pistol, and under the thin man's horrified gaze, he put a clean bullet through his head. Bang! Leaving the lifeless body of the strong man aside, Jason walked toward the second man and said, "You're out of luck. It seems your friend didn't want to talk. Tell me, how many people are in your group, and where the hell are they?" Jason's tone was ice cold, and even Rick and the others could feel the killing intent in his words. The man, who had just watched his companion be killed by Jason, had no intention of answering. "Go to hell, you damn bastard!" Sash! Jason drew a dagger with his left hand and stabbed the blade directly into the man's left hand without hesitation. The man screamed in pain before he could finish his words, and Jason choked him with the knife. "One last question, how many companions do you have, and where are they?" I know, please, don't kill me." Hearing these words, the man's body finally began to tremble. He immediately lifted his gaze to meet Jason's, this time fully realizing he was about to be killed. Everyone remained silent. Elias and the others only looked at the man with indifference. They had suffered too much from people like him, trusting individuals who ended up betraying them. The one who remained silent received another stab from Jason's knife, this time in his other hand. Seeing that he still wasn't getting what he wanted, Jason was about to get rid of the problem immediately. "I told you, I know." "I want an answer. Stop spouting nonsense." Good or bad, people had rarely, if ever, encountered soldiers like these, ones who didn't hesitate to wipe out an entire group without showing emotion. "We have a temporary hideout west of the city. I swear, if you let me go, I can take you there." Why are you still hitting me?" Hearing these words, Jason loosened his grip on the man and let him go. He sheathed his dagger and looked at everyone. "I just wanted you to tell me where the hell they are. My people and I are sick of bastards like you. This is a disgrace." It was the same answer they had gotten before from the group that ambushed them. Jason didn't want to waste any more time with people like this. So, when he heard where they were from and what they were worth, he stopped bothering. "All right, let's head back to our shelter." Wiping the sweat off his forehead, Jason drew his silenced weapon from his waist. Under the stunned gaze of the man, a bullet pierced his forehead before he could utter a single word of protest. The man's expression went pale, his body stopped moving, and he collapsed to the ground. "Elias, have someone collect these people's weapons, and if possible, find out more about their group. They could be a danger if our people run into them later." "Understood, sir." After hearing Jason's orders, Elias signaled for a group to search for the weapons and any important resources these people might have. Glenn and the others looked at Jason with strange expressions. The people present, except for Rick, Shane, and Daryl, felt that torturing and coldly executing these men was too much. After all, the apocalypse had only just begun, and they hadn't seen anything like this before, much less the darker side of what Jason was capable of to protect his people and their future. Jason paid no attention to them. He simply ordered a few people to retrieve Jimmy's body and bring it back to the prison. At the very least, they had to give him a proper farewell. After eliminating all the enemies, Jason took his weapon and walked around, surveying the aftermath. He pulled an old rag from his pocket and wiped the blood off his knife, then discarded the rag and walked toward Elias, who was examining the corpses on the ground. Regarding what had just happened, Jason hadn't expected such a chaotic outcome while Rick and he were away from the shelter. He recalled something from earlier and realized that this had also happened to Rick, but he hadn't anticipated that things would drag on for so long. At the very least, the situation hadn't escalated further. Some people don't understand the risks of leaving the shelter if they lack combat skills. Therefore, he now had to be much more careful about whom he allowed into his community. If these people hadn't attacked Shane's group and the others who had ambushed him in Atlanta, he would have thought he still had more time to gather people without much trouble. But now, everything was no longer as he had imagined just a day ago. Jason didn't want to eliminate his enemies in such a cruel manner, but if people didn't understand how harsh the world would become, they would continue to believe it was still kind. Judging by what he saw, the people he had just killed didn't have much with them, and they had likely been searching for supplies on the outskirts of this small town. Additionally, the chances of them being connected to others were very low. As long as he and his group moved carefully, there wouldn't be any problems, even if they encountered enemies. Not long after everything was settled, Jason and the others got into the newly acquired trucks and cars. As for Jimmy's corpse, it was carefully secured and loaded onto a supply truck. Of course, someone made sure he wouldn't turn into a walker soon after, as that would cause problems for everyone. The most affected by his death was Beth. Apparently, that boy had been her boyfriend, and watching him die so suddenly was hard for her to accept. And considering that it was partly her father's fault, it filled her with guilt-ridden thoughts. After stepping aside, Jason looked at the large convoy of vehicles and trucks. Without a doubt, this trip had been too turbulent, so now he wanted to see how the prison was doing. When Elias approached Jason, he looked into the distance and said, "It seems these people aren't worth paying attention to. What should we do?" "Even the smallest stone can cause significant damage," Jason replied. He didn't want to say more on the matter and instead walked toward the bus to check that everything was in order. "It looks like you found more survivors, that's good," Shane said as he approached the back of the convoy. Jason wasn't sure when Shane had stepped up beside him. It must have been tough for Shane to keep things under control this time, so Jason felt that this experience would be useful for them. The journey back was tough. "We encountered many problems, but I'm relieved that we're all together again." Jason had been feeling anxious about what was happening to the group in this place. After all, it was something he hadn't expected. Given everything that had happened, Jason turned slightly, looked at Shane, and asked, "I don't know what challenges you faced, but can you explain what you were doing here?" Even though Jason had the best intentions in asking this, Shane didn't see it that way and responded, "Lori wanted to go out and look for Rick. She had a crisis and thought it was the right thing to do. But thanks to that, we spotted the horde of walkers and managed to rescue Hushel and his family." Watching the soldiers moving back and forth, Jason silently nodded at the explanation. Since he had interfered significantly with the course of many people's stories, it was no surprise that events had unfolded differently. However, that wasn't something he cared much about now. He had to act in his own way and handle things with greater caution. These might seem like small matters, but they were factors he would consider in his future decisions. Seeing this, Jason didn't hesitate any longer and said, "We need to return to the prison. Things seem stable on our end, but our people are very on edge. The newcomers need to adapt to life there." "Yeah, I'll let the others know," Shane said, understanding Jason's point. "All right, let's go home," Jason said in a deep voice. His gaze swept over everyone, and he nodded in approval upon seeing that they were all fine. He had no intention of staying in this place any longer. As for the backpacks and weapons of those who had attacked Shane's group, Jason watched as some soldiers loaded them onto a military truck before boarding themselves and waiting for the others. Every little thing mattered when it came to survival. Maybe no one understood that now, but in time, everyone would. The convoy moved slowly through the streets, took a detour, and returned to the prison. Since the bus was full, Jason got into a relatively empty truck along with the others. "Were you injured?" Glenn looked at Jason with curiosity and noticed the bandage slightly stained with blood. He glanced at Jason, then at Rick beside him, and asked in a surprised voice. Jason, being a good leader and an experienced former soldier, was someone Glenn knew was highly capable. Seeing him injured now meant that the group returning from Atlanta hadn't had an easy journey. "Well, we were ambushed by a group of people near this area. After repelling the attack, we went back to their refuge and rescued some people who were their prisoners," Rick said in a somewhat calm voice. The convoy moved slowly, and everyone in the truck with Jason and the others looked at him with some surprise. They must have gone through difficult situations, just like in this place. After a while, the sound of sirens from the CDC suddenly stopped, followed by a distant explosion. At that moment, everyone knew that the detonation had taken out numerous walkers surrounding the area. Everyone then fell silent upon seeing each other's expressions. The people who had gone with Jason were in other trucks, while those beside him were new members of the community. The atmosphere in the back of the truck was extremely oppressive. Except for Rick and Daryl, everyone's faces were pale. Finally, Laurie broke the silence again and said, "Rick, could we find a better place than the prison?" Rick had also noticed that everyone's expressions were grim, but Laurie's words surprised everyone. "Why do you say that?" Laurie's expression tightened, and she said in a raised tone, "Why? Didn't you see how he killed all those people? How can he act normally after doing that and even sleep peacefully? I don't want to stay in a place led by a murderer." Jason, who was sitting in the corner of the truck bed, overheard the conversation but chose to remain silent. He knew that Laurie feared her husband was slowly becoming like Shane, and now he was definitely being considered in that discussion. "Be more rational, Laurie. Don't you know why he killed them? I would have done the same. No one can guarantee that those bastards wouldn't come back for us with more people and more weapons." Rick understood his wife's concerns, but now that she had made this conversation public, he knew that Jason and everyone else were simply trying to survive. No one in this world would remain good for long, which was precisely why he had participated in the rescue of the kidnapped soldiers. Glenn, who was in front of Rick and Laurie, suddenly spoke with a strange expression. "What right do you have to blame Jason like that? You were the one who left the prison and caused this whole mess." "It's hard to say, but if we need to blame someone, we should be clear about it. Is that wrong?" After speaking, Glenn shook his head. He couldn't understand the mindset of many people in this truck, starting with Laurie. Maybe she was just in shock from everything that had happened. Laurie didn't get a chance to respond. Rick, who had just heard this, immediately asked a question. He had only been told that Laurie and the others had been attacked by strangers. He didn't know his wife had run away. "What did you do, Laurie? Did you escape and leave Carl alone?" "I needed to find you." Laurie said those words with a dazed expression, then turned her head away and said nothing more. Rick's expression filled with disbelief, and then he scolded her in a low voice. "Have you lost your mind? I can't believe you thought it was a good idea to go looking for me on your own. Didn't I tell you I'd be back as soon as possible? What were you thinking?" Seeing that Laurie still didn't respond, Rick lost his temper and said in a low voice, "Say something." Laurie suddenly turned around, looked at Rick with clenched teeth, and said, "Because I'm pregnant." When Jason thought about it, he glanced at Shane, hoping he wouldn't have to deal with the growing hostility between the two men. "What?" Everyone behind the truck looked at Rick and Laurie in surprise, causing Rick's expression of anger to soften. "Is what you said true?" Glenn also intervened. "So you still plan to leave the prison even though you're pregnant? There are medicine, medical equipment, and doctors in the prison. Where do you plan to give birth if you leave?" In fact, Laurie's mind was also in turmoil when she said those words. She simply couldn't accept that her husband had to leave the prison frequently, let alone become someone like Jason or Shane. All she wanted was to take care of her family and ensure they never had to be separated again. Today, Jason had coldly killed 2 people in front of everyone. What will happen next? Will he die or continue killing? What will happen to Carl and her husband? Will they become like Jason? If her husband dies, will he be expelled from the prison by Jason's group? All these negative thoughts and emotions intertwined in Laurie's mind, making her think of things that would never happen and causing her behavior to become unstable. Now, thinking about her pregnancy only made things worse. Rick was just an ordinary man with the sole concern of securing his family's future. He didn't have romantic words for his wife or get caught up in those kinds of thoughts. The only thing on his mind was protecting his family, friends, and those around him. Even if he were to die, that thought would always linger in his mind. One of the most important reasons why he was so respected and loved by everyone was because he was a good leader, willing to give everything to protect his people. Now, upon hearing his wife say that she was pregnant, Rick didn't overthink it. He was simply happy in his own way, which made him completely ignore Laurie's complicated thoughts. We shouldn't leave the prison. There are researchers doing everything they can to create a vaccine for the virus. I'm sure the first vaccine will be available soon. This will give us a path to a better world. If what they say is true, at least we won't have to worry about turning into a walker when we die a natural death. Rick placed his hands on his wife's shoulders, wanting to see her expression. When he saw that she had calmed down a little, he felt relieved, knowing that, for now, the matter was settled. Looking at everyone, Rick had to say, "You might think Jason is cruel for doing all this, but I don't. I am willing, and I will certainly do the same to protect us." The reason Jason acted that way was because someone died, a good person who was determined to survive. He is willing to take the first step as a leader of the community, so we should respect him and feel safe with the decisions he makes. Herschel's sorrowful expression turned serious, and at that moment, he felt guilty. If he hadn't gone out that morning, perhaps things would have been different, and Jimmy might have survived. Undoubtedly, this pain would stay with him until the day he died. Everyone in the truck fell silent after hearing Rick's words. Beth, seeing her father in pain, took his arm and rested her head on his shoulder. She was one of the most affected by her boyfriend's death, but she couldn't blame her father. Doing so might destroy him. At the other end of the truck, Jason opened his eyes and looked outside while listening to everyone's conversations. A moment ago, Shane had told him why Laurie had left the prison. Thinking about it, Jason could only sigh at how things had unfolded. If Laurie hadn't left, Shane wouldn't have taken people to search for her, which meant they wouldn't have noticed the horde of walkers in time, and Herschel's family wouldn't have been saved. Yet, Jimmy had died anyway. It was difficult to predict what would happen next, so he could only work with what he knew without saying a word. But that didn't mean he would let anyone act freely. He then thought about what he should do next. Seeing that Jason had no intention of speaking, the others began sharing stories of what they had experienced when the rest weren't around. After a while, Jason finally broke the silence in the truck and contacted the base, ZZ. "This is Jason, respond." "ZZ. This is Marco, sir. I received your message. It's good to hear your voice, sir." A thoughtful look crossed Jason's face as he spoke in his usual tone, "ZZ. What's the situation in the prison?" "ZZ. The situation is under control. Many people are asleep now since they stayed up after the alert about a possible walker horde." Hearing this, Jason immediately thought of Guillermo, who had been bedridden, recovering from his wound. Upon hearing the update, Jason was relieved and asked, "ZZ. Guillermo, when did you start moving freely?" "ZZ. Ha ha ha, I couldn't stand staying in bed while most people are sleeping now. I can walk again. All I can say is that this place is amazing, brother." Guillermo's voice was full of happiness. The conditions in the prison were very beneficial for the elderly, which made him very happy. "ZZ. Well, I'm glad to hear you're in good spirits. We'll be back at the base soon. See you later." "ZZ. All right, we'll be waiting for you." Looking at the massive convoy heading toward the prison, Jason didn't want to risk being shot by his own allies, mistaking them for enemies. The supplies they were bringing were enormous, not to mention the large number of people. Soon, everyone still awake in the prison gathered at the main gate, and before long, they saw a long convoy slowly approaching. The walkers outside the prison were quickly eliminated before everyone arrived. All the people in the prison stared at the large trucks, with a tank and a helicopter behind them, unable to hide their astonishment. Several survivors stepped aside and whispered among themselves. A young man with an excited expression said, "This is incredible. They even brought 2 tanks with them." A chubby middle-aged man also smiled enthusiastically. "Ha ha ha, this is definitely a good haul. Now the prison's defenses will be stronger than ever." The young man suddenly leaned in and said mysteriously, "I heard something interesting from Murrell. Apparently, the captain wants to completely take over a military base." Even though he tried to sound mysterious, his voice was loud, and many around him couldn't help but look at him. "Really? You'd better take your lies somewhere else, ha ha ha." The young man, named Enrique, looked at them in disgust and retorted confidently, "What do you know? All you do is clean the prison. These aren't my words, they're Mole's words." "That old Murrell? That guy doesn't seem like a good person." The middle-aged man didn't have a good impression of Murrell. "If Mole heard your words, I wouldn't want to imagine what he'd do to you." Suddenly, a slightly soft voice came from behind the group. The middle-aged man's face changed as he turned around to look at a young man with glasses. "It's true that Jason is looking for a helicopter. He wants to travel to different parts of the country and expand. Watch your words so you don't cause unnecessary trouble," Tyler said with a bored look. "Yeah, I get it." Enrique, on the other hand, smiled, feeling satisfied that someone had confirmed his words. At that moment, the convoy had completely stopped in the courtyard, and everyone in the trucks jumped out. There were many new faces, but the ones who stood out the most were the fighters, figures in military uniforms, looking at the parked tanks and the many machine guns. This place was definitely in good hands. The prison, the main refuge of the SCT. The eyes of Elias, Emilio, Jim, Kenneth, and all the other survivors rescued by Jason and his group naturally scanned their surroundings. It was obvious that this place was a prison, but the number of survivors here was too large. There were dozens of people, security guards, and elderly individuals in the courtyard, even at a casual glance. All the soldiers were relieved to find a safe place where their comrades were protecting all these people. Just by looking at their good spirits, lively complexion, and bright expressions in a world that was dying more and more each day, they could tell that food in this place must be abundant, and security was clearly not an issue. Not only were all the adults armed, but there were also soldiers in the towers around the prison equipped with heavy weapons, melee weapons, and short-range firearms. It was evident that the people in this refuge were prepared to defend themselves. This alone made the soldiers very satisfied and happy to have come to this place. Given the state of the world, food was the foundation of survival, and weapons were the fuel that kept people alive. Jason jumped off the truck, approached Guillermo, and gave him a warm hug. As the others walked toward him, after exchanging a few words, he turned to the crowd. Looking at the soldiers and civilians who had arrived this time, Jason had no choice but to briefly introduce all these people. Seeing the prison's inhabitants celebrating the arrival of the new group, he removed his gloves and spoke loudly. "These past days have been long and difficult since we started communicating with each other. As you know, I can't fully guarantee your safety, but I promise I will do everything I can to make sure of it. These people joined us on our way back from Atlanta. Most of them are soldiers, police officers, and firefighters, while the rest are civilians who have been struggling to survive just like us. Please, let's give them a warm welcome." Upon hearing Jason's words, the crowd began to cheer and applaud joyfully. Many stepped forward to greet the soldiers who had been fighting. All this time. After finishing the introductions, Jason spoke again. "All right, I hope we all keep working hard. We need to start unloading the weapons, equipment, and food from the trucks and take them to the warehouses according to their categories. Some of the weapons need maintenance. Shane, I'm going to need you to help the newcomers and assign them to their respective groups." "You got it, buddy," Shane said as he gave orders for the trucks to move to the side of the prison, where all the vehicles and the rest of the tanks were stationed. Hearing this, Jason turned to Guillermo, who was standing beside him, and asked, "How's your wound?" "I'm fine. As long as I don't make any sudden or heavy movements, it won't affect me much. Don't hesitate to give me an order if you're busy or have something else to take care of." Guillermo smiled upon hearing Jason's concerned tone, then moved his body slightly to show he was all right. "That's good. Guillermo, I want to entrust you with the most important job. Take charge of the food and weapons. You need to keep a close eye on those two things and make sure no one misuses the community's resources. Jason brought up a crucial issue that had been on his mind. There was plenty of food, but he had ordered it to be rationed correctly to ensure people didn't misuse the supplies. The same applied to the weapons. Ammunition from now on should be reserved for humans, not walkers. It was obvious that Guillermo understood his concerns, so he knew exactly what to do to ease Jason's worries. "Don't worry, I'll make sure no rats steal the colony's cheese," Guillermo said with confidence. "Tommy, I still have something important to take care of. For now, since Sam Valdez is resting, I want you to move all the tanks and leave only 2 stationed in this open field. We need to conserve fuel and avoid using them unless absolutely necessary." "Understood, Captain." Tommy responded and immediately moved to carry out his orders. At this moment, the newly joined soldiers had accepted Jason's leadership and started calling him Captain, which reassured him. "For now, let's move inside the prison as soon as possible. Too much movement outside attracts nearby enemies." "You got it, sir," the others responded in unison before getting to work with cheerful expressions. The main courtyard quickly became a scene of organized movement. Glenn and the others supported Richard as they took him to the infirmary. Although the wound was no longer life-threatening, he had lost a lot of blood and still needed careful treatment. Jason called Rick and Laurie over for a moment and led them inside the prison. There was a separate room prepared for Jason. Although he didn't really care where he slept, everyone had set aside a special room for him as his personal quarters. At that moment, Jason led Rick and his wife into the room. It was simple, a bed and a basic table with a few chairs. Jason walked over to the table, sat down with exhaustion, and then motioned for the two of them to sit as well. After a brief silence, Jason looked at them and said, "First of all, congratulations on the child you're expecting. There are studies that suggest when a large number of people die around the world, humans instinctively react by reproducing. A strange phenomenon. Now then, Laurie, what I'm about to say might sound harsh, so you should be prepared." Jason looked around and then spoke directly. "I want to ask you a question. Do you know why the people in our community respect you and don't blame you much for what you did?" Laurie was surprised by Jason's question. It was true that she had felt a certain level of different treatment from the others, but she always thought it was because her husband was a leader in the group and a police officer. But now, when she heard Jason's question, she didn't say anything. Instead, she simply shook her head to indicate that she didn't know. Seeing Laurie shake her head, Jason continued expressing his thoughts. "I do know. You probably think they respect you because of Rick, since he's a police officer and a leader inside the prison, helping to manage everything here." Looking at Laurie without any negative expression, Jason spoke in a firmer tone, "But you still don't understand. Let me tell you, yes, it is because of your husband, but not in the way you think. You have no idea that the respect you receive comes because Rick is the first to step up for everything. He risks his life to find food, our food. My only goal is to give hope to everyone who follows me. I don't want the children to ever have to raise a weapon against another human. All my actions and decisions have a single purpose. Do you know what that is? Do you know why I built this refuge and strive to keep everyone safe? It's so that everyone can stay alive and preserve whatever humanity they have left." When he saw Laurie's shocked expression, Jason's voice softened again as he continued speaking frankly. "I was discharged from the military without honors or commendations. Do you know why? Because I disobeyed orders from High Command that ordered me to massacre an entire village. Today, we lost our first member of the community. Do you know the name of the boy they killed?" Laurie shook her head once again. Rick, standing beside her, wanted to say something, but he decided to hold back upon understanding Jason's intent. So, he chose to listen in silence and take responsibility for his family's mistake. "Let me tell you the answer. The injured one was Richard, who went outside only because he felt guilty for letting you go out. And the boy who died was named Jimmy. He had no family, and Hushel took him in at his farm when the world ended. And do you know why I know this? At that moment, Laurie began to cry softly. She finally understood that the only thing she could do now was listen in silence without arguing against Jason's words. After all, this was her fault from the beginning. Jason, who had stood up, walked toward the glass window and looked at all the people working. His tone returned to calm as he said, "Because I know the situation everyone is in. I have spoken with all of them. I know their names, their jobs, and what makes them special. I know their illnesses and dislikes. Each and every one of them is part of my plan to save all of our futures. Unless it's an accident or a major enemy attack, I do not allow anyone to die under my orders. If there's a bullet aimed at my people, I will be the first to get hit, and I want you to know that everyone is important to me, including you. I don't want Jimmy's death to torment you, because it wasn't your fault. I just want you to understand that any mistake we make in this community will be suffered by all of us. A funeral for Jimmy will be held later. I also hope that once you leave here, you will apologize to Richard. He believes what happened this morning was his fault. And never question my results again. It's bad for everyone. I work very hard to make sure everyone knows I do this for our future." After saying that, Jason turned around and looked at Laurie with a calm expression, and she nodded as she listened to his words. At that moment, Rick finally had the chance to speak, and he couldn't wait to say, "I want to apologize on behalf of my wife. It's true that I haven't been with her for a long time, and she did all of this because she was worried about my safety, so I hope you won't blame her." Jason looked at Rick and smiled. He reached into his vest and pulled out a large chocolate bar, saying, "This chocolate will make you feel better. Don't forget to take any food you need from the storage. We will prioritize for the babies. Also, your safety is assured in this place. There are doctors and teachers who can offer a little of what we've lost so far." Laurie began to cry while showing a smile and said, "Thank you, Jason. I know you do everything for the benefit of everyone here and try to maintain a peaceful environment. I'm just worried. Ever since I found out I was pregnant, I've been under a lot of pressure these past few days." As she spoke, Laurie could no longer hold back and cried in Rick's arms, while Rick patted her back and kept whispering to her to comfort her. Jason nodded at Rick, then left the room, giving them space to be alone. He didn't know how long it had been since they had last seen each other, nor how long they would need to talk. At that moment, he had already entered the cell block, and as soon as he stepped in, he encountered a very familiar group. Otis was silently holding his wife, while Hushel's family embraced one another. Maggie was supporting Hushel, as if she were telling him something. Seeing her flattering smile, Jason knew there must be a certain gentleman named Glenn involved in all of this. And now, once again, he was completely alone. Maybe that's why he liked Shane, because in many ways, they were alike. When Jason approached the cell where Hushel's family was having a conversation, he slowly made his presence known and said, "Hushel, do you have a moment? There are some things I'd like to discuss with you. It won't take long." Hearing his name called, Hushel looked toward the entrance of the cell and noticed Jason's presence. He turned to say a few words to his family, then nodded and stepped out of the cell. "All right, Maggie, take your sister outside for some fresh air. She needs it. She's still deeply affected by Jimmy's loss." Hushel's voice carried a hint of guilt, but he still gestured for Jason to walk with him to a more private area. Seeing this, Jason glanced at Hushel's daughters attentively. The two sisters seemed to have a close bond, just like in the original story. Suddenly, as if remembering something, he stepped aside to let them pass. When the two men reached an open space, Jason carefully observed the land. They stood still for a moment, watching all the people busy with their work. How quickly things change, don't they? Upon hearing this, Jason let out a small sigh, knowing that Hushel was probably still silently suffering his losses. It was inevitable. In a world in decline like this, who wasn't suffering? After giving Hushel a thoughtful look, Jason asked, "Hushel, what's your first impression of this place?" Pausing deliberately, Jason waited for the old man to share his thoughts. When no response came, he turned to the side. Hushel knelt down, picked up a handful of soil, examined it carefully in his palm, and then said, "This land is good. There's plenty of space, and it seems like there are water sources here. It's a suitable place for what you're aiming for." Hearing this, Jason realized that although Hushel had seemingly given up on his farm, he hadn't done so voluntarily, just like in the original story. After Jimmy's death, Jason thought that maybe the old man would lose the will to keep going, even with his daughters by his side. But it was too early to draw conclusions. He had just arrived at the prison and still needed time to process everything before focusing on other matters. Hushel had a vague idea of why Jason had called him. He had overheard some words from his daughter about this place, which led him to believe there were deeper reasons behind Jason's timing. "If we ever manage to expand our safe territory, we might be able to reclaim your farm, and you could return home. Of course, to make that happen, I'd have to consider many other important factors. But what I want to tell you is that we still have that possibility in the future. I'm sorry about what happened with Shane at the farm. I know many of your family members were infected." Jason hesitated before continuing, already thinking ahead about expanding their farmland. However, when he looked at Hushel's previously calm expression turning increasingly grim, Jason saw the old man close his eyes slowly. When he spoke again, his rough voice carried a weight of sorrow. "You don't need to say that to comfort me. Do you know what the stupidest thing was? Back at the farm, when Shane shot that walker, what do you all call them? In the heart, I realized just how foolish and selfish I had been. My family, my neighbors, my son, they were all dead. I tried to convince myself that this was just a reversible disease. I tried to feed all those people in the barn, even as their bodies continued to rot. Now that I've accepted reality, does it really matter where I stay?" After hearing Hushel's long words, Jason couldn't help but respond. He had always thought the old man's mindset was somewhat similar to his own, but it seemed Hushel still didn't fully grasp what Jason was trying to explain. "Hushel, I want to share my deepest thoughts with you. The reason I established this place and brought all these people here is for an important purpose. I see this place as a starting point, a safe haven for survivors who have nowhere else to go. Over time, everyone will come to understand that many out there will try to do horrible things to us. Some of us have already learned that the hard way. But I believe that as long as our strength is great enough, the virus will no longer be a threat to us. Even if we never find a cure, the hope of moving forward will be in our own hands. But to achieve that, I need enough food to feed everyone, enough weapons to protect them, and enough land for them to live in peace." "You have big goals ahead of you," Hushel replied, "but you need to take care of yourself first. If everyone in this prison depends solely on your strength, you need to understand that you will become irreplaceable here." Hearing Hushel's words, Jason knew that the old man hadn't been wrong in his first impression of him. He understood that Jason was probably desperately seeking light in this dark world, but that also meant carrying a heavy burden on his shoulders. I'm not looking to be someone important. I just want to live while fighting to keep our world as intact as possible." With a small smile, Jason reaffirmed that he wasn't trying to become some great figure, he simply wanted to survive and accomplish his goals within his capabilities. He wanted to see how far he could go and how many people he could lead toward a better future. Sighing, Hushel shifted his gaze to a group of people who were busy carrying supplies and gathering the machine guns that had been set up the night before. "You know, I'm a devout believer, and I've never lost my faith. But I know for sure that God did not bring this hell upon our world. I'm certain of that, and I want to thank him for allowing me to meet you." Hearing a new tone in Hushel's voice, Jason felt slightly relieved and thought it was time to bring up the main topic of their conversation. "All right, let's not dwell on that for now. I need to tell you something important." Pausing for a moment to gather his thoughts, Jason saw Hushel nod, signaling him to speak. "We have enough food for a long time, but right now, we're only around 710 people in this prison, and we need to slow down our food consumption as soon as possible. At the moment, food isn't an issue, but we can't be certain about the future. I don't want people just sitting around, waiting for our resources to run out. Since I plan to take in more people in the future, we need to build a solid and sustainable base, not just to keep the walkers out and protect ourselves from them, but also to keep bad people away. We need to start using this land as soon as possible and think about moving livestock here while we cultivate the fields. Later on, we'll expand to better farmland, but for now, we can start right here. Jason and Herschel discussed how they would handle agriculture and the plans that needed to be developed. After a long conversation, Herschel was surprised by the well-structured plans in Jason's mind. Does this man ever rest? His unwavering determination, dignified leadership, and constant preparedness made Herschel question whether he had been wasting his own life. Jason's ability to think and act was seemingly always at its peak. Since there was too much to be done in the community's base, Jason didn't have time to oversee everything himself, so he entrusted Herschel with this responsibility. Jason gave Herschel full authority to select trustworthy people with the help of a guard to start working on the project. Later, he would approach Guillermo to work alongside Herschel on food production. For now, Jason had settled this matter. However, he still had many other things to deal with, and one pressing issue stood out. Apparently, some troublesome students had been brought to the prison by Shane and were currently in a separate unit. He needed to resolve this as soon as possible and determine whether it was a problem worth addressing. Jason, who was heading toward the block where those problematic students were, looked at Daryl and asked him to come along. Their friendship wasn't deep, but they knew each other well enough to understand what the other wanted. On the way, Daryl briefly talked about the situation with these students and mentioned what they had discussed the day they entered the prison. Jason, listening to this, made a mental note of their behavior and what he might expect from them in the future. Depending on the situation, he would have to educate them so they understood their true position within the prison. Jason knew that an internal conflict could erupt over anything, which would cause him problems. That's why he had asked Guillermo to take charge of guarding the weapons and food. However, Jason only thought about these things for a moment before dismissing them. These students were probably just a little nervous, so he simply needed to handle them well and understand what they wanted next. Crack! With the sound of a lock turning, Daryl opened the block where the students were being held. Upon entering the unit, Jason found himself standing in front of a group of people who had already stepped out of their cells. As he looked at the numerous young people in front of him, they also silently looked back at him. The most striking boy among them seemed to be some sort of leader or representative. They're all here. When they first arrived, it looked like they wanted to tear each other apart, Daryl said, glancing at the students with an indifferent expression. After observing them for a moment, Jason told Daryl that he would take it from here. The tallest young man in the group, who matched his own height, particularly caught his attention. This boy was probably the unshakable core of the group. Although Jason always had the best intentions with people, there were times when he needed to make things clear for everyone. This group seemed to be just simple survivors, and the best part was that no one appeared to be sick. Suddenly, Bruno Lastra stepped forward, blocking Jason's view. Lowering his head slightly, he said, "Are you the leader of this shelter? Doesn't seem like much. We've been waiting for a long time." Hearing this, Jason was pleasantly surprised by the stupidity of these people, wondering who they thought they were to start a conversation like this. He simply said, "It seems no one here wants to talk. I'll come back another time, and until then, you won't receive anything except water." Seeing that Jason and Daryl were about to leave, Bruno's face turned pale, and he immediately said, "Please, don't go." Jason stopped, turned his head, and looked at the boy named Bruno before saying, "You're right. We don't have much time, and we can't keep you in this place indefinitely either. I ask you to stay calm and say what you need to say. Let's talk like civilized people. Trust me, this is your best option." Since these people wanted to play childish games, Jason decided to put an end to it and make things clear. Well, there's no need to state the obvious. The world has changed, and so have we. So let me ask you one simple question. Where do you want to be? Out there with the walkers or in here, surrounded by strong walls and protection? Seeing that their attempt to test Jason's temperament had failed, a girl named Nora, standing behind the group, furrowed her brows slightly. She realized that Jason wasn't someone easy to read. Noticing the fear on Bruno's face, Nora shook her head, unable to wait any longer. The walkers will kill us. Many people in this group can't even run properly because of fear, she admitted. Jason, looking at the group, listened to her words and said, well then, you need to decide, who do you fear more? The walkers out there or me, right here and now? Everyone shuddered at these words. No one understood the true intentions of the leader of this place or what he might do in this situation. Originally, Nora wanted to see what Jason needed, observe his decisions, and figure out if there was any way to manipulate him. Jason took a step forward, placed a hand on Bruno's shoulder, and said, this morning, I had a lot of trouble getting back to my shelter. Someone who is no longer breathing in this world murdered a young man who simply wanted to survive. Silence fell over the room as Jason's words sank in. No one had anything else to say. After letting go of Bruno, Jason took a few steps forward before suddenly stopping. I don't want you to be nervous. I'm a good person as long as no one causes trouble around me. I'm here to present your options and wait for your decisions. That's fair enough, isn't it? Everyone silently nodded while looking at Jason, and finally, they all turned their attention to Nora. Standing behind her companions, Nora silently cursed this group of idiots. She couldn't really blame them, though, because things hadn't gone as she had hoped. Now that she had failed to gather any information about Jason, she had no idea how they would be treated in this place. Of course, Nora had considered that this situation might happen. If things had gone according to plan, Bruno should have apologized for his idiotic behavior and then proceeded to ask the basic questions about what would happen to them here. But instead, Bruno had been overcome by fear and completely forgotten how to follow through. Frustrated with her foolish companions, Nora had no choice but to act. At this moment, Jason's eyes were already fixed on her. Realizing that everything was in vain, she simply stepped forward from the crowd. Hello, my name is Nora, and for now, I'm the one making the general decisions for everyone here. Her expression was calm, but an air of intelligence surrounded her. Hearing this, Jason smirked slightly. Even if this girl hadn't said anything, he would have known that she was the smartest of the group. Whether or not there was deception involved, he also wanted to test the temperament of these people. As for whether her words were credible, it wouldn't be too difficult to find out, he could just ask another group of people. Thinking this, Jason stepped closer to the girl, who was no taller than 1.70 m, looked at her carefully, and asked, now that we're talking properly, were you the one who told everyone how to behave? Not at all. On behalf of all my companions, I apologize. You should know that we've been locked in these cells for many days. Everyone started getting scared because no one was telling us what was going to happen to us. Nora's face turned slightly pale at Jason's accusation, so she quickly explained her honest thoughts. Very well, then I should introduce myself. I'm Jason, the leader of the shelter known by the initials SCT. I oversee and manage everything that happens within the prison. Seeing Nora nod, Jason smiled and said, first of all, on behalf of everyone, I apologize for the lack of proper attention you've received. You should know that things haven't been peaceful these past few months. Nora shook her head at Jason's words and replied, it should be us expressing our gratitude. Thank you for deciding to save us. After finishing speaking, Nora stepped a little closer and then continued, you must know that we have been locked up for many days. If there is anything we need to do as payment, we are willing to do whatever it takes to settle that debt. But I hope you can explain to us about this place and whether it is possible for us to leave. Hearing these words, Jason did not respond immediately. He walked toward the exit and said, I have no problem with that. I'll give you a tour of the prison and then explain the rules. How about that? Soon, a large group of people followed Jason out of the unit where they had been staying for several days, finally stepping outside. As they walked into the open courtyard, they felt a sense of relief after being imprisoned for 2 days. Each and every student took a deep breath of fresh air while taking in the surrounding landscape. It was then that Jason began explaining to everyone in a deep voice, "First of all, what we do in this place is survive. Everyone here is just looking for a safe future, and I simply help them while I work on creating the home that everyone is searching for." Turning around, Jason smiled slightly, and everyone felt that he was easy to get along with. "One of the most important points is that I met with you all late this time because I was out on a mission. That prevented me from explaining the situation in this prison sooner. I hope you won't blame my group for that." When Jason finished speaking, he gave everyone a slightly apologetic look. Now, at least, most of them had a more relaxed expression. After Jason's simple clarification, the students also understood the reason. They were complete strangers, and no one here was obligated to help them. In fact, it was more than enough that they had been well fed during this time. "Let me tell you where we are. This place was originally a prison in western Georgia. My people and I fought very hard to clear this place of walkers. Now, there are a large number of people from different places living here. Today, we have everything we need to take care of ourselves and those around us. Some people handle the walkers, others have important jobs, and the most important thing is that everyone is contributing." As Jason explained what they did in this place, they saw soldiers in the watchtowers. Everyone's eyes lit up when they saw them, heavily armed. Some couldn't contain their excitement. "Oh my God, look at all those tanks. I didn't think there would be so many. There are soldiers and police officers among the guards protecting this place. You'll definitely be in good hands here. We have medical equipment and many other resources." "No, Jason, you're a good leader," said Candice as she approached in a white lab coat. With a somewhat tired expression, she and many others were the only ones still fighting to find a cure for the virus. After saying those words, Candice smiled and then added, "Jason, we believe the cure has been created. The first test doses are ready. Would you like to take a look?" "Are you talking about vaccines for that virus?" Nora's eyes widened in surprise. At that moment, she couldn't contain her reaction upon hearing the word vaccine come from that woman's mouth. Upon taking a closer look at the conditions of this refuge, not only was Nora pleasantly surprised, but everyone around her exclaimed with excitement. At that moment, they all approached Jason without saying a word. Without exception, everyone was eager to learn more about the vaccine. Nora silently processed everything she had discovered in this place. As a girl who only wanted to survive in the best way possible, she paid attention to every little detail. When she heard about a vaccine, she didn't know how to react. Seeing the excited faces of the people surrounding Candice and himself, Jason extended his hand to create some distance between them. He turned around and said, "I ask you all to stay calm and listen to my words carefully." Once everyone had settled down, Jason continued, "Listen, this vaccine is nowhere near what you imagine. We still don't know exactly what it is capable of, so now is not the time to get excited." Upon hearing Jason's words, disappointment spread across everyone's faces, except for Nora, who stood to the side, lost in thought. Unlike the others, she understood how lethal and uncontrollable this virus could be. As the daughter of a congressman, she knew that very little, if anything, was known about what was happening outside this prison. Now, the future lay in the hands of the researchers in this place. Although this vaccine might only be the beginning, there are many things to consider. I ask you all to wait until it is truly ready. Jason looked at all the young people in front of him, adjusted the vest on his body, and said, "For now, I'll have my people show you around later. But remember to choose a job suited to your abilities. Also, I don't want any trouble from you. Never forget that the rules cannot be broken. Ranks must be respected to maintain stability in this place. But before anything else, think carefully about whether joining our group is a good idea. In the meantime, I must take the necessary precautions. I hope you all understand." Looking at Daryl, who stood to the side, Jason signaled him to proceed and asked those willing to join the group. Those who refused would be sent back to their cells. After making everything clear, he he walked with Candace to the laboratory. At the same time, Daryl decided to take the energetic newcomers through the prison to help transport large supplies of food and resources inside. More than 70 days had passed since the virus had completely spread across the world. With no system or authority in the streets, everyone had to fend for themselves. Today, even Edwin doubted whether anyone was still fighting to find a cure for this virus. Inside a large space, where the laboratory would be built to continue the fight for a definitive cure, Jason and the others were having a small meeting. From everything we know, the wildfire virus only attacks humans and activates when someone dies. This explains why, in general terms, we are all infected. The bite of the infected merely accelerates the process, turning us into one of them within hours. After my last contact with a researcher in France, they clarified that they were close to finding a cure for the virus. But communication was lost, and we were unable to maintain contact. I can only assume they ran out of power or something else happened. I always believed that one day we would overcome the virus. Slowly, we lost contact with laboratories around the world. The one in France was the last to hold out before we lost communication. At least we managed to obtain valuable information from the French researchers, who were far ahead of us in their studies. The virus in France is stronger, faster, and more aggressive. It takes only seconds for a person to turn into a walker, truly terrifying. In the large space, Edwin Yonoa slowly explained everything they knew about the virus to Jason. Jason already knew some of these facts, but only on a superficial level, nothing technical like what these scientists understood. Jason listened in silence as he walked around the area. So, are there any side effects to starting production of this vaccine you say is ready? Hearing this question, Edwin Yonoa fell silent. It was true that he had managed to create a vaccine to eliminate the virus from the human body, preventing transformation into a walker upon natural death. However, it was still unknown if it would have any side effects on humans. It's too soon to tell, but although the vaccine can be manufactured, we still need to study whether it has any adverse effects on the human body. Candace said with a sad smile. After all this time, they still had nothing guaranteed. Hearing this, Jason furrowed his brows. He couldn't risk himself and his people on a vaccine whose long-term consequences were unknown. But still, some would have to take the risk. After confirming as much information about the vaccine as possible, Jason began discussing the laboratory renovations. Along with the crop fields, the lab would be one of the most important facilities, requiring a large workforce. All these plans were still in progress, but they needed to be addressed as soon as possible. Looking at Candace and the other researchers, Jason said, "Everyone truly appreciates your efforts. Don't rush your research, take your time. We will protect you from any danger." Seeing that there was nothing more to discuss, Edwin suggested we could begin human trials soon. It's very likely that the vaccine doesn't have many side effects. So, all we need is for someone to volunteer to take it and start monitoring the results. Knowing that human test subjects were needed, Jason thought for a moment and said, "If we want to take things slowly, it would be best if I find test subjects myself. I'll look for criminals or bad people. At least they can serve as test subjects." That's... Some people murmured, feeling somewhat guilty about the idea, but Edwin stepped forward and said, "If the vaccine works as we expect, then there's nothing to worry about." Very well, then. Leaving the laboratory, or rather, the place where it would be built, Jason quickly walked back to his room. There were some things he wanted to develop on his own, which meant the coming days would be extremely busy. And on his list of priorities, France would undoubtedly be at the very top. In the hours following their arrival at the prison, Jason personally took charge of many of the developments, making the best possible use of the safe areas within their current territory. After the soldiers and police officers arrived at the prison that morning, they all became prison guards and began patrolling the area, quickly adapting to the new routine. As for the civilians, some accepted simple jobs, and in time, they would naturally transition to roles better suited to their skills. It wasn't until the end of the day, as darkness settled over the surroundings, that Jason gathered everyone to address a very unfortunate event for the SCT community. In a corner of the prison, there was a box containing the body of someone who, until today, had never imagined losing their life at the hands of complete strangers. Everyone stood surprisingly silent around the wooden box. Even though they had heard that someone had died, most of them didn't truly understand what had happened, except for a few who preferred to remain quiet. No one asked how long they would be gathered in that place because they all knew something important and serious was about to happen. Jason stood before them, observing the solemn expressions, some serious, some indifferent, and others grim. Beth stood beside Herschel, who wept silently, while a few others bore dark expressions. Believe it or not, many of our friends standing here today now realize that things have changed once again. As soon as he spoke, Jason expressed his thoughts naturally. Everyone looked at him, and he decided to continue. This morning, a group from the prison, led by Shane, who had originally gone out to search for supplies and ended up trapped by a horde of walkers, suffered an attack at the hands of other people. Jason furrowed his brows, expressing his anger. He didn't expect many to understand, but he wanted this day to remain in everyone's memory as a warning of what was to come. He pointed out, people in this world have started to show their true nature little by little. Everyone is struggling to survive, while others seek only destruction. This time, we were attacked. The person murdered in cold blood was just a young man looking for a quiet place to survive. But no one asked him. Those who took his life were only after our women, our resources, and the slaughter of all the men in our group. Upon hearing Jason's words, Shane stepped forward and said, "That's right. Today, we were nearly killed by people who wanted to take the little we had. Richard was wounded, and he's now resting. Today, it was us outside the prison, but tomorrow, we could be facing an attack at the very gates of our new home." As Jason looked at the heated Shane, he nodded and said, "But that won't turn us into a closed-off community. No, we will learn to defend ourselves, and we will not let anyone harm our people. I promise you, we will be ready when someone tries to hurt us."
Are you still thinking of remaining ignorant of the situation?
Or, on the contrary, will you be ready to defend our home? How do you feel now? Everyone held their breath until someone stepped forward and shouted, "We will be ready to welcome those who want to live with us and kill all those who seek to harm us. Yes. We will kill our enemies. No one will harm our community. No one will even think about hurting our families." After saying what needed to be said, Jason declared, "All right, rest tonight, and tomorrow we will work hard for our future, my dear friends." Jason then placed his hand on Jimmy's coffin, feeling a strange sensation inside him as he looked closer at how easily someone close to his circle could die. In this world, even a small mistake could mean death in the blink of an eye. Up in a watchtower, Jason sat in silence, with Rick by his side. As Jason spoke with Rick, Daryl climbed up with his crossbow. He sat down at the edge of the tower, then looked at Rick and said, "Is this a date or something?" It had been nearly a month since Rick and Daryl met, and their relationship had grown closer over time. Not being good at communicating with people, Daryl had gradually eased his way in. Now, at least, Daryl was able to talk more casually. "The night seems quiet. As long as there isn't much movement outside the prison, the walkers won't come near," he commented. "We need to do a lot of work in this place. It's well protected, but we know how dangerous a horde of walkers can be," Rick said as he scanned the area. Jason smiled slightly and pointed out, "We also need to watch out for people. If we want to gather more survivors, we must be careful about who we let into this prison." To be honest, after so many experiences, Jason felt more familiar with the people around him. "Yeah, this is just the beginning," Rick said in a deep voice. Jason sat in a corner, scribbling some nonsense in a notebook, lost in thought. Apparently, these were still the early days of the overall story, with many people and events unfolding naturally around the world. Crazy enemies, people who don't think about the future of others and only seek to cause trouble and maintain power in their respective communities. He needed to be aware of time and act accordingly to gain unique advantages. Obviously, he didn't know much about what was happening in different places, but he understood the importance of advancing their plans as much as possible and fortifying this location to at least have a base of operations. After finishing his notes, Jason turned the page and began drafting a brief plan to make this community more than just a group of people struggling to survive. Operation Cobalt. Jason murmured softly. Cobalt? Daryl turned toward Jason, his eyes sharp. Oh, Operation Cobalt was issued by the military. According to many of the soldiers who arrived at the prison, they were ordered to kill all people, infected or not, but very few could carry out such dark orders. They told you that themselves? Rick asked, still unable to believe such an order had been given. Yes. I remember that in the hospital where you were, the military was killing people indiscriminately. It was a tragedy, but did it change anything? The world went to shit. Not even the government could do anything. Ha, ha, ha. Daryl scoffed in his rough voice. From now on, we need to be careful when we go out. It's better to ask 3 questions first than to be ambushed by the enemy. With nothing more to say, they all went to rest, leaving security in the hands of Sam Valdez, who had gone to bed early since he hadn't slept, while ensuring that the Walker horde didn't approach the prison. Keep moving forward, huh? In the 2 days following Jimmy's funeral, the students who had been taken in by the group began making decisions about whether to stay or leave. Of course, they really only had one option, but that was something Jason didn't tell them. But this was not surprising, otherwise, how could he secure his territory from enemy hands? Due to the recent experiences of both new and old members of the community, everyone began to look favorably upon whatever had to be done to keep this place safe. Because of Richard's injuries, everyone fully believed the words Jason had spoken that day and began mentally preparing for any situation. After the majority of the students almost immediately agreed to join them, Nora started interacting with many people in the prison. Everyone had different views on the future, but when it came to Jason, no one had anything bad to say about him. They all expressed their gratitude for the help he and his people had provided in their time of need. During that time, Nora thought these were just the opinions of the older members of the community. But as more and more people came into contact with her, it became clear that none of them were lying. Through word of mouth, Nora's understanding of this mysterious community leader gradually filled in the doubts in her mind. According to what she had heard, he was a retired soldier who worked at the CDC before the virus outbreak. He had extensive knowledge of many things, and some even said he was prepared to face any situation. There was a lot of information that people could talk about endlessly. Some even compared Jason to a unique leader for the future of humanity, something she found absurd. Nora also believed that Jason had a habit of doing whatever it took to achieve his goals, which genuinely terrified her. She wanted to be sure it was safe to stay here and that Jason was not just a seemingly good leader hiding something sinister in the shadows. If he had truly taken care of all these people, then everything else was insignificant. However, there was one thing Nora didn't know: Jason had ears all over the prison. Nothing could happen without him finding out, and within the first few hours, even Sam Valdez had volunteered to get rid of this troublesome young woman. Jason seriously considered it. He wasn't entirely sure what this woman was trying to do, nor did he particularly care. Was she just making sure this place was safe? At first glance, she seemed like nothing more than a nosy and foolish girl, but she could be useful in many ways. Taking all these factors into account, Jason decided to play along and let Nora work for the community. She was very intelligent and observant, and with the right training, she could become a highly lethal asset. Finally, Nora approached Jason and formally requested to join his group. Jason agreed. Knowing all the little games this girl had played proved that she was very careful and intelligent. Under Shane's watchful eye, he observed each student one by one and confirmed that they were good people. On the first day that Nora officially joined the community, she was given a task right away. It was simple. Familiarize herself with a polygraph device and use it to formulate a plan for screening new arrivals. The only requirement was to conduct the most thorough evaluation possible, analyzing their mindset, behavior, personality, and whether they posed a danger or benefit to the group. Nora, who received this job, began preparing and studying in depth how to use a polygraph. Overall, she was quite satisfied with the task. Meanwhile, Jason, occupied with important matters, began executing the biggest and most ambitious plan he had come up with since realizing he was in a world overrun by the undead. The 200-day plan. As the name suggests, it was crucial to carry out a major transformation of the prison in a maximum of 200 days and a minimum of 150. But before that, the hierarchy within the community needed to be established. Jason wanted to create a much more sophisticated group, a community on another level. Power and authority would be clear and simple for everyone, and if he intended to expand his influence to other parts of the country, he needed order. This order was divided into 3 levels, 3 ranks, each with increasing authority. The first rank consisted of regular people, those who worked in the kitchen, carpentry, maintenance, and other jobs that contributed to the community's development. First rank members had no access to storage areas, weapons, laboratories, the infirmary, or any internal community information. The restricted areas at level 1 were designed to maintain security and prevent unauthorized access to crucial locations. Next came the second rank, those with 2 levels of authority. These were the guards, scouts, and attack units of the SCT. Rank 2 members had access to weapons, storage areas, and more important information. Rank 2 could only be granted to individuals who were former military personnel, police officers, or firefighters, and they were explicitly tasked with maintaining protection and order within the community. Following Rank 2 was Rank 3. These were the leaders of different areas within the prison, responsible for ensuring that everything ran smoothly. To achieve Rank 3, one had to gain approval from both the community leader and all small group leaders. Level 3 leaders had the power to issue orders, make announcements, and lead important discussions. This rank represented one of the highest levels of authority, and their commands could not be ignored by ranks 1 and 2. Lastly, but most importantly, was the community leader. The leader was the ultimate authority within the group and had the final say on major decisions affecting the development and future of everyone. This structure ensured that newcomers couldn't wander freely around the prison and that restrictions were placed on new members. This system gave Jason peace of mind, knowing that if he ever had to leave the prison, he wouldn't have to worry about authority being compromised. Ranks would be displayed on a bandana that every member of the community had to wear on their shoulder or another visible part of their body. If someone failed to wear their bandana, they would be immediately detained. If they resisted, they would be subdued with whatever force was necessary. However, there was a secret that only Rank 3s knew. Each of them would receive a small tattoo on their wrist to ensure that their authority could never be challenged. Only Rank 3s and a select few undercover Rank 2 members, under Jason's direct orders, could request to verify the tattoo, solely for identification purposes. Once the hierarchy was clearly established, everything else would quickly move forward under Jason's next plans, the complete transformation of the prison. The scope of this renovation was vast. It included the construction of laboratories, large walls surrounding the prison, additional watchtowers, fully armed, renovations to housing areas, power systems, water systems, agriculture, and livestock breeding. At the same time, with the newly established chain of command, many scouting operations would be conducted around the area near the prison. The first objective was to recruit new survivors. The second was to gather all kinds of supplies, food, firearms, ammunition, construction materials, and any other useful resources. Jason was fully focused on these plans. Aside from the few carpenters and construction workers in the community, he was responsible for sharing all collected information through books, with the fundamental goal of ensuring that everyone completed their training tasks. As for the plan to rebuild the entire infrastructure, the first step was constructing the laboratory. Ensuring a stable power supply for the entire prison was critical. With this in mind, Jason had acquired energy storage devices, equipped with photovoltaic generators, or in simpler terms, solar panels, and had even secured the possibility of generating wind power. Regarding the wall, Jason thought a lot. Given the destructive power of a piercing projectile, no matter how thick a wall might be, it wouldn't help defend against an explosion. He couldn't make the walls too powerful. Weapons and equipment were the same for everyone around the world. Considering all this, he decided not to overthink it. As long as the walls could defend against ordinary bullets and explosions, they would be a great help to everyone. Therefore, the structure would be built this way, 8 meters high and about 3 meters thick, with the most critical areas reinforced by a steel layer in the center. Behind these walls, armed towers would be placed at every corner of the perimeter, alongside the already existing watchtowers. Once the required weaponry was installed, the entire base would be fully protected by a formidable firepower network. After designing the security facilities with the help of an architect from the community, Jason also outlined the interior areas, such as dormitories and storage rooms. The cells, for instance, were too dark and somewhat damp. Many rooms had no lighting, so power installation needed to begin as soon as possible. The interior needed to be painted. Painting the originally dark walls white would also help improve illumination. There was also the issue of a reliable water source. To solve this problem, several experts suggested digging a well in the courtyard. Although there was an external water source that made resource collection convenient, the quality of river water wasn't guaranteed. Therefore, it was better to create a well. This way, the water quality would be superior to the external source due to the natural filtration effect of the soil. With the entire layout on the table, the land was distributed more efficiently, and areas for crops and livestock farming were designated. Crops were the easy part. Jason had prepared well with high-quality seeds and materials. As for livestock, it would be necessary to gather animals from different places. Jason planned to clear an area outside the prison to expand the territory used for growing food. He would remove one of the fence lines around the prison and enclose the farming area to keep it protected. With this setup, even if a walker approached, it could easily be taken down from the fence. After finishing everything, Jason gathered a stack of papers and called a group of people in charge for a meeting with the architect. Inside a room within the prison, Jason gathered all the captains from every group, both internal and external, within the community. Everyone had documents in their hands and passed them among themselves. Looking around, Jason sat next to the architect so he could explain the contents of the documents in a few words. This meeting was very important, as it would not only transform the prison but also clarify the ranks for everyone. The people reviewing the documents in their hands didn't seem to pay attention to anything else, carefully studying the contents of this information. After about half an hour, everyone finished reading, and Jason waited to hear their thoughts. What do you think about the plans that will be implemented next? Is there anything that needs to be added or discussed? Everyone looked at each other, and Rick was the first to take the initiative to speak. Well, I heard the architect's words and read the information. Let me ask a question first. Where are we going to get so many construction materials? Just considering the refuge's wall, 8 meters high and 3 meters thick, Jason, have you considered how many materials are needed for this? Roll, who heard Rick's question, said, considering that we need to build walls 600 meters long, that would be about 12,600 cubic meters of cement. In short, that's a huge amount of materials. The requirements to properly build this structure are detailed in the main report of the plan. Taking into account that it might not be enough, where are we going to get so much cement? Not to mention the steel plates and bars. Upon hearing these figures, everyone's mood was slightly affected. The requirements to make this place according to the proposed plans were unimaginable. You're right to express your concerns. Although the plan structure demands a lot of resources, finding them won't be difficult. Around the prison, according to Sam Valdez's reports, there are many resources from abandoned constructions. Also, several places have been scouted during expeditions, so this isn't a serious problem. Even if that issue is resolved, there's still the problem of steel plates. This material isn't as common to find, am I right? Guillermo interjected with a perplexed look. This can't be that bad. Hearing someone speak up, Guillermo turned his head toward the voice, which belonged to an Asian man named Glenn. Seeing Guillermo looking at him, Glenn responded, "The last time we went out, I also noticed that there were large piles of construction materials in an open space not far from here, but most of them were covered with fabric and straw. It was hard to tell what they were, but you could see large objects shining." Shane and the whole group saw them. Shane, who was sitting beside Jason, also nodded, indicating that Glenn was right. Of course, Jason had also left some resource caches that only he knew about in western Georgia. Very close to that location, if he hadn't encountered setbacks along the way, he had planned to find them during expeditions, but it seemed Glenn had discovered one of those points. "Ha ha ha, that's incredible." Standing up, Jason nodded toward Glenn and said, "Since several resource sites have been found, we need to go to those places and take a look. In the meantime, does anyone have any suggestions? The ranking system is perfect for providing an overview of ranks and restrictions. As long as we don't have restricted areas where weapons and food are stored, this will be good for seeing who has authorization to be in those locations," Shane said while looking at the armbands with 3 black lines marked on his arm. These armbands were already being made by a group of experienced men and women in sewing. Soon, everyone should have these identification bands. Rick, beside him, studied the wall plan for a while, and now that he heard what Jason said, he made a suggestion. "Jason, I think we should dig a moat outside the outer wall. Not only could we store water, but it would also give us a wide field of view for protection." Rick's proposal was supported by Hushel and everyone unanimously, so Jason gave the green light for the work to begin. Shortly after everyone's discussion, an even more refined plan emerged in the hands of the community. Seeing that the plan was coming together, Shane and the others began explaining the armband system, which would identify people based on their work. This was accepted by everyone, and soon the armbands were distributed to all survivors within the prison. Of course, at first, it might be confusing, and some would make mistakes, but at the very least, it was necessary to have some level of supervision in this large place. Early the next morning, Jason called all second-tier authority figures in the prison to hold a meeting and inform them about the discussed plan. Murrell leaned close to a group that was discussing nonsense. With an intimidating look, he got closer and closer to the face of a young man named Carlos. Carlos's face instantly turned grim, and he asked, "Excuse me, is something wrong?" Without moving, Murrell stared at Carlos, placed his arm over his shoulder, and said, "Am I the only one who thinks these armbands are a load of crap? I might get confused and use it to wipe my ass. What do you guys think? Sure, if someone hears you, it could get you into trouble. I actually think it's a good idea, considering there are people who want to harm our community. It was truly terrifying when we encountered some thieves. It's a good thing everything was resolved quickly." Carlos usually liked to strike up conversations with everyone. Sometimes, he even remained quiet because he just couldn't stop talking. "I think the same. This was a good idea to classify ranks and, as mentioned, have clear restrictions on areas where not just anyone can enter," Jim said with a sharp look. With a single glance, he eyed the armband with a Class 3 authority mark on Murrell's leg. Daniel approached and said, "Well, considering this is the first expedition since we arrived at this place, the results will be crucial for our development." Mole looked at these new faces and nodded. They were good men, and they seemed well trained, except for Carlos. "Well, you're right about that. A lot of people want to take things that don't belong to them. What a bunch of idiots. Anyway, I hope you all have a good trip." After saying that, Mole walked to the back of the room. He definitely wouldn't take part in such a minor mission. There were more important things to do, like cleaning weapons and drinking alcohol. With a nervous smile on his face, Carlos took Murrell's attitude seriously and asked, "Does he have level 2 authority? He seems like a complete slacker." When Daniel looked at Carlos, he said, "He has level 3 authority. He may be unbearable in terms of behavior, but he's responsible for training people, and he does it well. Level 3 authority." Carlos's eyes widened upon hearing that the old man had the highest level of authority within the community. Seeing Carlos's astonished expression, Jim smiled slightly and began talking about today's mission. It seems to be a material gathering mission. Large groups of people with level 1 authority will be helping in the coming days to load the materials while a group covers the area. After hearing this, Carlos looked around and asked, "So, do all these people seem really strong, or is it just me?" "Well, some are military, and others are police officers. It's no surprise that most of them have the experience needed to protect themselves outside the prison," Daniel said calmly. "I hope we don't run into a walker horde. It would be terrible if we came across one up close." Carlos was genuinely nervous. Just as Carlos finished speaking and was about to turn around and leave, Jim grabbed him from behind. "Hey, don't worry, I'm not done yet." Carlos widened his eyes and waited to hear all the information. Daniel was also intrigued by what Jim had learned from the others. "I heard that Captain Jason is leading the collection team this time. It's said that this mission will last a long time, and the experience gained will be immense. Everyone is eager to learn more from this captain. From what I've researched, so far, everyone who has followed Jason on external missions has never suffered a casualty. Most importantly, many who go out this time will have the opportunity to receive a vaccine after the mission is over. It's incredible that no one dies when they go with Jason. He's truly reliable, and it looks like everyone is looking forward to heading out with him today." After hearing Daniel's words, Carlos began to carefully consider whether the decision he had made was the right one. In his opinion, second-level authority figures take the greatest risks, but the greater the danger, the greater the rewards and experiences. Everyone would learn to survive and take care of themselves. Just as Carlos was deep in thought, wondering if, as an ordinary man, he could survive in this group, Jason had already begun presenting the plan to everyone in great detail. As Jason's plan was gradually laid out, bursts of discussion erupted among the crowd before him. As usual, most people supported him, while a small group hesitated, worried that this series of actions might endanger their lives, but no one opposed it. After all, what this great project would provide them was a safer living environment in the fight against walkers. Jason spoke for about half an hour, detailing the groups and leaders who would direct the mission, the movements and strategies for mobility, and the precautions that needed to be taken. When Jason finally indicated that he had finished speaking, the crowd below erupted in discussion, with many standing up and asking a series of questions. "Captain, everyone in the community is ready to do whatever is needed, but why do we need to strengthen the defenses here?" A middle-aged man hesitated under the gaze of those around him, but still spoke clearly. "You're Orlando, right?" Jason looked at the middle-aged man with a slight smile on his face. This man was considered an important figure in the community. During a shootout at the beginning of the apocalypse, his wife had died. After escaping, with nothing left to fight for in this world, he found a nursing home where he helped everyone. After living in the prison for some time, he had earned the respect of many people. Orlando was pleased that Jason remembered his name. He tied his hair back and said with some concern, "Sir, none of us doubt your decision, and the results of this project are good, nothing but beneficial for everyone. But considering the danger, it's still difficult for us to overcome our fear of the walkers." Hearing this, Jason looked in Orlando's direction and said, "Believe me, as the leader of this community, I have taken all these concerns into account. I know your fear of walkers, which is why you will be protected by guards who are experts at eliminating them." After saying that, he finally stepped forward to address everyone and added, "Let me ask you something, Orlando. Have you ever seen how destructive a horde of walkers can be? Very few people know that walkers in Europe have mutated. Some can open doors, lift objects off the ground, and climb obstacles. Can a simple wire fence really withstand an attack from 10,000 walkers?" The prison was a unique and excellent place to establish a base, but these problems had always been on Jason's mind. One day, he would face enemies intelligent enough to drive hordes of walkers toward his base. How could he ensure the security of this place then? The entire prison was surrounded by a fence strong enough to keep the walkers out, but that didn't guarantee that the smarter ones couldn't climb it. Fortunately, he was aware of many things that could happen and was preparing to avoid being caught off guard by any future developments. The SCT Operations Center must not be breached by any kind of enemy. Walkers can do that. How is that possible? When Jason saw the disbelief on everyone's faces, he said, "I don't want you to be shocked, but walkers won't be our greatest concern.
Can we keep this place safe if another group covets our land?
I know you're worried about losses on this mission, but at the very least, I want to assure you that the guards in each group, I personally, will do everything in my power to ensure no one gets hurt. Even so, we will suffer losses.
Some of us will die.
But whoever survives will be stronger than any other man or woman. My plans go far beyond this mission and will bring changes that improve everyone's lives in the future. The purpose of every living human is to rebuild civilization, and no one needs orders to feel that mission in their hearts. That's why every member of SCT will fight with that goal in mind." Jason's passionate words echoed throughout the place. Everyone felt invigorated with an unbreakable fighting spirit, and at that moment, they all wanted to take up arms and deal with the walkers outside. Looking at those who had been inspired by his vision, Jason knew this was the perfect moment to push forward. Without hesitation, he shouted in a deep, authoritative voice, "Do you want to live a good life in the future?" "Yes, Captain." "Who here wants to destroy the walkers and never fear that those mindless corpses will eat us?" "We want to destroy the walkers and lose our fear in the process." "Then, who among you wants to rebuild civilization, to create a place where children can grow up without touching a weapon and the elderly can grow old without witnessing the darkest side of this world?" "We want that." "Then don't doubt. Don't fear. Don't question how powerful you can become. Follow the plan, and one day, we will all see a new tomorrow without walkers. We won't doubt. We humans may be the most wicked creatures in this world, but we are also the best at adapting to any condition. Remember, hard times create strong men. Let's go." Rick, Shane, and the others standing behind Jason looked at the determined eyes of the people before them, then at Jason's cold and resolute expression. They all had to admire his ability to stir the hearts of everyone with just a few words. Many in the crowd looked at Jason with passionate eyes, and some women even began to feel something more than just shared excitement. Girls like Amy wondered more than once if what they were starting to feel was love for this man, but Jason himself seemed to have no time for such negative emotions. And Nora, who stood at the very front of the crowd, also looked at Jason differently in that moment. This man was not simply aiming for survival, Jason wanted to rebuild order across civilization. She had always considered him cold and detached from those around him, but now, her thoughts had changed. With a single command, all second-level authority figures began moving toward third-level leaders, working together with the rest of the people. A record was now being made of those who would be leaving, and the necessary equipment was being distributed among the groups. Tomorrow would mark the first day of a new month. Tonight, everyone would rest, and a small farewell party would be held. Jason promised everyone that once the mission was complete, they would receive an unexpected surprise. Guillermo was deeply distressed that night. As the person in charge of supplies, it pained him to see so many resources spent on a party, and he felt a little uneasy. After being assigned to keep the food and weapon storage in order, he reported daily on what was used and what remained. But to tell the truth, Jason was the one most informed about the resources in the warehouses and everything that was being used. For now, the warehouses were full, and even large trucks remained packed since there was no space to move them at the moment. In the armory warehouses, there was also gunpowder and machines to produce certain types of ammunition, but very few people had the skills to make them, and sooner or later, they had in mind to acquire a factory. That night, everyone received wine, and a lavish meal was prepared. After all, many would be leaving the prison, and some might never return. That was just how things were, and no matter what Jason did to prevent it, sooner or later, there would be casualties. As Jason sat in a corner of the table, lost in these thoughts, the people around him were having a pleasant evening. Andrea, who was aware of her sister's feelings, nudged Amy to go talk to Jason. After leaving her sister next to Jason, she walked away, leaving her alone. Jason, on the other hand, had no such colorful thoughts in his mind at the moment. After feeling movement beside him, he turned and asked, "Do you drink wine too?" Amy smiled and nodded. She picked up the wine bottle and handed it to Jason, casually asking, "How have you been? You don't seem very used to this kind of atmosphere, do you?" Hearing this question, Jason looked around and felt a slight anger rise in his mind. Over time, he was slowly feeling more responsible for the future of his community, and he knew that everyone was about to face true hell in the coming days. Amy, noticing Jason's serious expression, said, "I'm sorry. This place is really nice, and a lot of people feel comfortable with what has been built here. We're all grateful, Jason." "I'm glad to hear that. Let me know if you have any difficulties. Even though time might not always be on my side, when I'm here, I can handle trivial matters. For now, times will be very tough, but once the plans for this prison are completed, everyone will be safe." Jason could only look at everyone with a slight smile. Now, more than ever, he could see that all his efforts over time were beginning to bear fruit, which pushed him to keep striving. Amy looked at Jason and suddenly realized her mistake. Seeing Jason, who only appeared to be in his early 20s, bearing such a heavy burden, she abandoned her original questions and instead asked, "Jason, how old are you?" I think I'm 26. "Why?" Jason didn't understand the strange question Amy had just asked and gave her a slightly confused look. Without realizing it, Amy exclaimed, 25 years old. "That can't be. I thought you were younger." "Ha ha. Well, you're not wrong. To be honest, I can look a bit young if I don't have a beard, and I rarely tell people my real age." Jason was a little surprised by Amy's words. Seeing Jason suddenly smile, Amy smiled too, but she knew that her feelings didn't stand a chance. Thinking about it, she decided to ignore them. Amy could clearly feel that Jason's kindness toward her was nothing special, so common that he was the same with everyone. Maybe now wasn't the right time, or perhaps Jason simply wasn't interested in such feelings in today's world. Jason noticed a slight change in Amy and asked more attentively, "What's wrong? Do you not like the food?" Hearing this question, Amy quickly shook her head and smiled again. "I'm fine, I just thought of something. Come on, let's make a toast." As soon as Amy said that, Jason raised his bottle, wanting to end this somewhat awkward conversation. "By the way, do you have something specific to ask me? Didn't your sister mention it a moment ago?" Amy stood up and walked toward the crowd. After taking a few steps, she suddenly turned around and said with a smile, "Maybe later, we could be more than just friends." Seeing Amy's expression, Jason suddenly stopped and said, "Then I guess that's settled. Go get some rest." "Yes, goodbye." Amy walked away from Jason's table with a cheerful smile and headed back to her sister. Although she hadn't managed to confess successfully today, she had at least said that sentence, which she considered a small victory. Jason, on the other hand, watched Amy as she walked away and sighed in relief. He wasn't foolish at all, of course, he knew Amy's intentions. But he had no interest in a romantic relationship, not because he felt nothing for her, but because his mind was occupied with other thoughts. Romance and love come with a lot of drama. Just looking at the trouble poor Rick had with his wife was proof that having a partner in the apocalypse was rarely a good idea. Besides being a distraction, it could also lead to more serious problems, and right now, he wasn't interested in that. Fortunately, Amy seemed to be very perceptive and had fully understood his intentions, which made Jason feel much more at ease. So far, he hadn't really considered what it meant to end up in this world. But now that he was here, he would make sure not to waste time on relationships. Without a doubt, this kind of mindset would take him far and give him the chance to save many people. Looking around, all the people surrounding him were undeniably real, not just side characters. That alone was enough to make Jason feel gratified, at least knowing he could keep them safe. Whenever he felt that sense of peace, he reminded himself that many important things would happen in the future. With that determined mentality, Jason was committed to protecting his community and creating a safe path for everyone. That resolve prevented him from getting lost in other uncomfortable thoughts. Despite being surrounded by companions, he always carried the heavy burden of leadership, and deep down, he had no desire to get involved in matters of love. Sighing once more, Jason looked at the distant crowd celebrating. These people were proof of his existence in this world and the reason he was still here. If they were to disappear, he might not even have the motivation to keep going. I shouldn't let them drink excessively again, Jason murmured as he watched a young man nearly set himself on fire. If it weren't for Merle kicking him out of the way, tonight could have turned into a disaster. I agree, my friend. Just as Jason was thinking out loud, a calm voice suddenly spoke from behind him. Jason turned his head to see who was speaking and found Shane, holding a beer in his hand, as he sat down beside him. "Shane, how are you, buddy?" Jason asked with a slight smile. Shane considered Jason a very special person, one of the few who had understood his decisions from the beginning. In the original story, if it hadn't been for Shane's obsession with Laurie, which was, in Jason's opinion, unnecessary, the man could have played a crucial role in the future of the group. Even after his death, he was still remembered by many. "Looks like everyone is having a good time. I never thought this place would turn out better than the CDC," Shane said with an observant look. Jason, who had been contemplating Shane's potential, smiled and said, "Of course. Although we should regulate how much alcohol these people drink." After hearing Jason's response, Shane's expression became a bit complicated, and he said, "A lot of these people haven't suffered enough, but they're all willing to fight for survival. It's good that we have a leader with that kind of vision. Otherwise, things would be much harder." "Ha ha, you think too highly of my leadership. I'm just trying to survive while helping people along the way." Shane remained silent. He could relate to Jason. Both of them had no family left and were simply surviving in this world while leading others. "I want to believe we'll all survive, but..." As he spoke, he pointed into the distance, looking at the people celebrating. "Many will die, and we can't prevent it. The only thing we can do is keep fighting for those who are no longer with us. It's better not to dwell on what might happen or what will happen. If we get consumed by thoughts, we won't take action." Jason set down the bottle in his hand. Seeing that Shane had his mouth open as if he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words, Jason felt a bit uncomfortable. He temporarily set aside what he was doing, stood up, and said, "If we ever expand and manage to open a shelter, you'd be the perfect candidate to lead those people." When Shane heard what Jason said, he still couldn't believe it. After thinking for a moment, he quickly realized how highly Jason thought of him and replied, "Whatever you say, buddy. To make that happen, we'll need to work hard. TSK, the problem won't be the walkers. I'm sure that soon, our biggest issue will be other humans who don't want to see us survive." Jason expressed his concerns as he looked at Shane. Shane took a sip of his beer and said, "We'll kill anyone who tries to hurt us, you have my word." "Yeah, we should get some rest then. We've got a long day ahead of us tomorrow." Jason extended his hand to Shane and helped him up. Looking into the distance, he pointed ahead. "This place will be incredible, my friend. No one will dare to harm us." After saying that, Jason walked toward his room, wanting to avoid any more conversations. Today had been a long day, and all he wanted was to rest. He had been working hard these past few days, after all. The progress of his plans might be slow, but no one could predict the results he was aiming for. It was only a matter of time before the prison became a strong and formidable base. Very few communities were advancing at Jason's pace. And although he knew he couldn't compare himself to others just yet, it was only a matter of time before his power continued to grow. Once this place was ready, it would be time to open another shelter, and then another, progressively expanding their survival network. The next morning, Jason woke up early and, upon leaving his room, found Guillermo outside the lower unit. His expression made it clear he was having a tough time. His mind still seemed trapped in the events of the previous night. During dinner, a much larger amount of food had been consumed than usual, which worried Guillermo, who was responsible for managing supplies. Large quantities of food and wine had disappeared in one go. In his former refuge, those provisions would have lasted a long time. Jason didn't want to waste time on unnecessary conversations because he knew what this man was looking for. He pretended not to pay attention to his surroundings and quickly prepared to leave. At that moment, the last thing he wanted was to hear about matters unrelated to his main objective. However, Guillermo, who was looking at some sheets inside a folder, sensed something passing by his side. When he looked up, he realized it was Jason, the very person who had authorized a celebration to finalize the upcoming plans within the prison. Guillermo extended his hand and stopped Jason, still not understanding a few things that were bothering him. "Wait, Jason. Guillermo, you know I have a lot of urgent matters today. If it's not important, let's talk later." Jason stopped and glanced sideways at Guillermo. "It is important. I want to know what you meant when you said I should handle all decisions regarding supplies. Will you do anything else after bringing the construction materials?" Jason, hearing this, turned toward Guillermo and clearly stated, "A pre-selected group and I will be leaving the prison for an indefinite period. We don't know when we'll return, but it will definitely be before all the ongoing orders and plans are completed. All right, I'll make sure to do my job. Take care, and don't worry about this place's safety," Guillermo said, not wasting any more of Jason's time. He knew the man before him had many more things on his mind than he did. "See you later, Guillermo." Jason nodded at Guillermo and walked toward the main yard to organize all the preliminary operations for his indefinite exploration. Today was the first day Jason's plans began to take shape, the starting point of everything to come. At exactly 7 in the morning, all the participants in the operation gathered in the field. After dressing in a dark uniform, Jason stepped out of the facility and stood before them. "Gentlemen, today marks the first day of our great operation, the one that will change our future forever." His gaze swept across every person present. His words, filled with seriousness and determination, resounded strong and clear, ensuring that everyone understood him without difficulty. Once everyone awaited his next words, Jason continued, "I only have one small request for all of you. Take care of yourselves. Nothing is more important or valuable than your own lives. No matter what happens, as long as we have a base to return to, I will always do everything in my power to lead everyone toward a better future. Therefore, if there's any danger you're not prepared to face, the first thing you must do is save your life. Understood?" "Understood, sir." He raised his hands in the air, looked at everyone, and shouted, "All right then, let's move out, gentlemen." As if Jason's words held magic, all the small unit captains moved to their vehicles, and within seconds, the entire group was in motion. Jason observed everything before turning around. He looked at the group with whom he had started this journey. Except for Sam Valdez, all of them, along with Elias's group, would accompany him on a very different journey this time. "Gentlemen, I'm glad to have you by my side once again. Let's support the collection team and then proceed according to the established plan." Jason glanced at everyone and smiled slightly. "Understood, boss." This time, the first followers who had chosen to stand by him before the world fell apart would accompany him on a special journey. Except for Sam Valdez and Tyler Thorpe, the rest would be in his group, along with Elias's four-man team. "Sir, it's truly frustrating not being able to join you this time." Sam Valdez looked at the group he was most familiar with and couldn't help but complain. Jason, understanding Sam, patted his shoulder and said, "Sam, your presence as the head of the outer guard is irreplaceable in this prison. I completely trust you and your abilities." "Ha ha, looks like no one trusts me." Tyler approached with a friendly smile. "Come on, kid, I taught you how to shoot, and now you handle weapons correctly. You'll definitely be useful for defending the inner facilities and managing all communications." Billy Fisher smiled slightly. "All right, guys, it's time to move out." Jason, who had been delayed, looked at everyone before saying goodbye to Tyler and Sam Valdez. This time, he had no idea what he would find on this journey, but he knew he would have no advantage or prior knowledge, something that would put his skills to the test. The prison gate had already been opened, and several Level 1 authority personnel from the collection team were in the trucks, while the defense team was positioned in Hums equipped with machine guns and off-road vehicles. The rest of the people who stayed behind at the base gathered their tools and returned to work. Everyone inside the prison was constantly busy, so much so that time never seemed to be enough to accomplish everything planned. Before long, there was significant movement throughout the prison. Everyone was occupied with their respective tasks, but most importantly, no one showed any signs of discontent. Under the guidance of an architect inside the prison, the place was gradually being distributed in different ways. With continuous work and movement, it was only a matter of time before resources began arriving at the prison. In the prison yard, several machines previously selected by Jason worked tirelessly. Large trenches were being dug for foundations, and the floors of laboratories and other facilities were quickly being remodeled under Jason's instructions. Jason had also ensured that a large-scale radio station was installed. Of course, this task fell to Tyler, and a suitable team was assigned to work under his orders. Several students assisted with the work, but establishing communication with the outside world was not authorized. Everyone knew that the more survivors they attracted, the more likely hunters would come looking for their resources. Therefore, it was decided not to establish any external connections until the prison was fully remodeled. Somewhere outside the prison, Jason watched as the last batch of materials was successfully removed. During this time, there had been no issues, and everything had proceeded smoothly. Many continued working quickly and efficiently, and under Shane's supervision, everything was progressing well. Come on, guys, this is the last stop before we finally head back to the prison. As he walked in from outside, Jason observed the work, then frowned slightly and raised his hand to check the time. It was still early, and it was time for him to start moving as well, prompting him to leave this place for now. While everyone was working, Jason spoke in a calm voice. "It's time for me to go. Finish this task and return to the prison. We'll stay in contact via radio, there won't be any issues." "Is it really necessary to leave?" Upon hearing Jason's words, Rick couldn't help but ask, looking at him with a complicated expression. When the nearby crowd heard the conversation, they all fell silent and chose not to interfere. This plan had been set in motion days ago. "Don't miss me. There are people who need my help somewhere in this city, so we'll take a look at what's happening beyond our operational area." Jason stepped forward and looked at Rick. "I guess it can't be helped. Be very careful, and come back if you see the place isn't safe." "Don't worry, I'm not alone," Jason said as he got into a vehicle with his group of 8 men, excluding himself. They were all experienced soldiers and combat-trained men. This was no ordinary team. As a pair of off-road vehicles drove away, Jason silently considered everything he could do before the next wave of events unfolded. He had arrived at the prison long before the worst would come, and he had no intention of staying in one place, waiting for trouble to knock on his door. This is only the beginning. More than 80 days ago, humanity was executed. The righteous and the sinners were judged in the same way and with the same pain, depending on their circumstances. Many managed to hide from the spread of the virus that started it all. Some were able to escape becoming a walking corpse or something worse. Who knows what the hell is out there, right? With a lot of luck and skill, it seems many have survived. After all, it's impossible for humans to perish completely in this hell that many claim was sent by God. But that's just unjustified nonsense to avoid the blame humans bear for playing with a force more powerful than they could control. Now, we suffer the consequences of decisions that were never in our hands. But amidst all this hell, I see a great opportunity. This opportunity gives us the chance to choose our own path and make our own decisions in a single order. There will be no more powers or authorities controlling human development. There will be no more factions to follow in the future, and the best thing for everyone is for a single leader to take charge of humanity's future. This is worth it. As we slowly continue surviving, we will learn to work in this land stained with walkers and decay. I have a wish, and that is that with determination and help, we can move forward together from this point on. Inside a large building, a man with disheveled hair, clad in black tactical gear, stood in front of a broken window, holding binoculars. Moving slowly, he carefully observed everything ahead, and his tone of voice grew increasingly disappointed. I thought that when he said this group was invincible, that we couldn't mess with them and that our only option was to retreat, he was talking about a group of a completely different caliber, a level far beyond what my eyes are seeing now. So Jason, if you allow me to explain, they attacked us at night. We didn't know, sure. Looking at the group with a face full of fear, Jason ignored them and pointed ahead. This group of people is supposed to control most of the city, right? That's correct. An old man named Jeffrey entered the room and looked at Jason with a somber expression. Their leader is called Dimitri, and his aggressiveness is exactly as I expected when I first met him. He doesn't care about people at all. His modus operandi when encountering a new group of survivors is to disarm them. They then take more than half of the food and continue doing so periodically. That group recently settled near our community. We don't know much about them, but they are extremely dangerous. We were thinking about leaving this place until those bastards took many of our people to prevent us from leaving. As the two talked, loud footsteps echoed from the hallway outside the door, and then the door swung open as a group of people dressed identically to Jason entered. Sir, we have split up as per your instructions. This place houses around 150 people, and if we leave, they will surely die. At that moment, Tommy stepped forward with a serious expression, reporting the situation to Jason. During all this time, Jason had been roaming the city of Atlanta, searching for key locations and essential resources. His primary goal was to see if he could establish a refuge at some point in the city and expand from there. It wasn't long before they ran into problems, and as they dealt with them, they also took in some survivors and kept moving forward. But not more than a month ago, Jason and his large group, who had been moving all over Atlanta recovering military weapons from bases, came across Jeffrey's group, which had recently been attacked by Dimitri's men. When Jason saw the opportunity to grow his community, he became interested in having this group of people join his side. This was the perfect moment to establish a base on the outskirts of Atlanta. It's time for you to decide, Jeffrey. Will you and your people join the SCT? Or would you rather continue being oppressed by another group? Jason's eyes quickly scanned Jeffrey and the people beside him, who seemed to be his leadership team, and he said, "You probably don't know me, and that's normal. Many in my group are experienced soldiers, and we are still working to slowly rebuild a new beginning amid everything we have lost so far. Are you from the army?" Upon hearing this, a woman beside him looked at Jason with a certain wariness, surprised. But she soon realized she had asked a somewhat foolish question. If these people were highly equipped and in such good condition, what made her think they weren't lying or had ulterior motives? It seems you all come from a place where you aren't suffering as much as the rest. At least that assures me you aren't lying and aren't like those other soldiers who massacred many of our loved ones at the start of the catastrophe. But what do you gain by helping us? What do you mean? As soon as this question was asked, Jason frowned, stared at the woman, and said, "Well, our goal is to expand and help the people who still want to survive. Expanding our territory into the city of Atlanta wouldn't be a bad idea at all. I understand. I never thought that after all this time, there would be a group like yours that still cares about people." The woman named Anna looked at Jason's indifferent expression, which assured her that he wasn't lying. She couldn't detect any trace of deceit or hidden motives in his words, and she immediately realized that he could be trusted. Hard times have made people distrust one another. Nowadays, who can be certain of what the other side is planning? Hearing about this group's struggles, Jason remained seated, looked at Anna, and said, "It's a shame you don't have many options, but I assure you that my intentions are good, and soon, my actions will speak louder than my words." You have a point. After sitting for a long time, Jason gradually organized his thoughts and considered what he could do in this situation. It had been about 2 months since he left the prison, and according to his people, everything was running smoothly. During all this time, aside from wandering like a nomad and facing many horrors of the post-apocalyptic world, especially how terrible people could be, he had realized that the chances of encountering hostile humans were even higher than running into walkers. Unconsciously, he touched his chin and murmured, "What do you think, Tommy?" "It definitely won't be a problem, Captain. We have more than 30 active soldiers and 13 more in reserve, not counting the people in this group. Considering the difference in experience and the way we operate, we can handle this without calling for reinforcements. I'm not sure if having a direct confrontation with those people is a good idea. They're definitely well armed." After hesitating for a moment, Anna added, "But if you're willing to eliminate that man's group, many will join you without hesitation." "All right, I understand," Jason said while considering whether it was a good idea to establish a second safe zone in the city. There weren't many walkers since most people had already abandoned Atlanta, but that didn't mean it was safe. Seeing the conversation come to a pause, Jeffrey looked at Anna and said, "Can you step out for a moment? I'll give him all the detailed information we have on Dimitri's group. Things will go faster without too many people in the room." "Yes, I understand." Anna nodded and left the room. "I'm not too fond of the idea of trusting ex-military personnel. Before this whole apocalypse started, I saw with my own eyes how many soldiers killed everyone, whether they were infected or not," Jeffrey said honestly. When Jason heard Jeffrey's words, he nodded in understanding. Many soldiers, whether they wanted to or not, had followed Operation Cobalt, though it ultimately failed to control the situation. "But we don't have many options." "Your eyes tell me you're not an evil man. I hope I'm right about that." "Well, the place where Dimitri's group is located is that building you saw. He has a lot of people under his command, and they're not ones to be trifled with. It's a large facility. That group definitely has access to a lot of important resources that others don't. I'm still unsure if we'll be able to take them down. I think our forces might not be enough." After considering the possibilities, Jason smiled slightly and said, "That shouldn't be a problem. If they're such a troublesome group, then we need to eliminate them completely and take their place to establish a new refuge from there. I see that at least your men fully trust your words. I just hope we can fight so that the people in my shelter will have a better place to stay," Jeffrey said, looking thoughtful. "Well, now you know everything about our group and what we've sacrificed to survive. If you're willing to take down Dimitri's group, all of us will do our best to support you. There's nothing to fear. I'm sure my people would love to wipe out that group quickly. The real problem will be the walkers. The people in this community will need to help clear the area of walkers that could hinder our movements." After saying this, Jason glanced at Elias and walked out of the room. Considering the resources Dimitri's group had, they would be more than enough to take them down. But eliminating that group offered many benefits. Not only would he be able to establish a new refuge in Atlanta, but he would also provide safety for all the survivors in the area. 3 months after leaving the prison, Jason had managed to gather a new group of over 70 people, most of whom had great combat skills. They were not only police officers but also former soldiers, and all of them had chosen to follow him. A few days later, outside a building, the captains of many squads under Jason's command gathered for a meeting, gripping their weapons tightly. Everyone surrounded Jason with expectant eyes. Each of them had recently joined his group, and they were slowly realizing that this man was someone worth following. His plans would undoubtedly push them toward a better future. Among the well-equipped group, Jeffrey stood to the side with the fighters from his survivor group, who now followed Jason's direct orders. They all placed their trust in one man, and Jason was undoubtedly confident he could solve this problem as soon as possible. Jason observed this experienced group, all dressed in black tactical gear. Some had uniforms combined with protective armor on different parts of their bodies. Holding weapons in their hands, they stood firmly in place, fully armed and ready for war. Jeffrey, a leader guiding the members of his group, looked at the slowly setting sun and said, "Has everyone been informed about what we're doing today?" Elias, who stood beside him, watching the situation from a different angle than Jason, lowered his gaze slightly and said, "Our people are at least well informed, but in short, today we're going to wipe out an entire community that has recently gained influence in this part of the city. We've all discovered that they take many people prisoner in the building they've claimed as their base. Among us, there's no need to mention what their intentions are, right? As our leader said, tonight will be easy, and after this, incredible things await us all." "Very well." Jeffrey nodded in satisfaction. The first time Jason arrived at his refuge, he thought it was just another group like Dimitri's. But he was both surprised and doubtful when he heard that Jason was uniting the nearby communities in Atlanta to begin implementing a plan to restore some semblance of hope to humanity. A new future. With researchers, a large army, ample supplies, food, and weapons to fully equip an army. Jeffrey undoubtedly trusted Jason and said, "So, are there no changes to our preparations? I thought we would have more than 150 people to eliminate the enemy group. Even though our strength is great, we shouldn't underestimate the enemy's power. It's something to seriously consider." At that moment, Jason, who had been silently observing the situation from a corner, spoke. "We never underestimate our enemies. It doesn't matter if they're 5 or 100. If we're attacking tonight, there's no need to keep considering their strength. Am I right?" "You are absolutely right, sir." At those words, Jason's cold and authoritative gaze swept over everyone as he said, "I found you, I reached out my hand to you, and now you're here. Many of you lost your wives or suffered in ways similar to what those bastards are doing to all those people right now. I've always told you, walkers aren't the only thing we should fear. People have been forced to make decisions based on their hearts. We've made ours, and if we compare them, it's clear that the future is on our side. I don't justify the blood on my hands. I have never regretted anything I've done up to this point, and I hope you haven't either." Hearing these words, the expressions of all Jason's followers, except for Jeffrey's people, reflected a shared sentiment. They had all suffered and bled in this world that was suddenly destroyed, and they were willing to give everything to be the ones to rebuild it. "We're with you, boss. Let's take those bastards down." Jason's eyes turned cold. He looked at everyone with a smile and said, "Since we're all ready, let's get rid of some pests that have no place in our future." "Yes, sir." Everyone began boarding the vehicles. Jeffrey was amazed by Jason's ability to communicate with his followers. Without quite understanding how, he also felt that following him was the right path forward. Outside, in a large building, a massive refuge filled with armed men, people were celebrating the great haul they had gathered that day. They laughed and shouted without fear of attracting walkers, as they had sealed the streets with metal fences and large buses behind them. "Ha ha ha. I don't know which damn psychopath alerted all the walkers in the city, but we should be thanking him," a bearded man remarked. "Yeah, if it weren't for that son of a bitch who lured all the walkers away, we wouldn't have been able to loot all those supplies and weapons the military left behind. It sucks that we have to stand guard outside the refuge tonight. Right now, I'd rather be enjoying all the wonders life has to offer." "Ha ha ha. You're just a bastard who thinks with the wrong head. Stop talking nonsense." Meanwhile, in the distance, figures were slowly closing in on the refuge from all directions. Once everyone was in position, a sound broke the silence of the city. It echoed over a kilometer away, immediately drawing everyone's attention. This type of sound immediately caught the attention of everyone in Dimitri's shelter. Instinctively, they all grabbed their weapons and scanned the surroundings, unsure of what was happening. "Everyone, stop wasting time and get ready." At that moment, an elderly man dressed in a military uniform approached quickly. He looked at the stunned crowd around him and waved his large hand to give an order. This powerful command snapped everyone out of their daze, and they immediately began preparing according to the previously arranged defense plan. Just as everyone in the shelter was getting ready, hundreds of walkers suddenly appeared on the least protected main street of the refuge, inexplicably drawn directly toward their location. "Undead up ahead. This is impossible. How the hell did they get past the fence that was supposed to keep them away?" Shouts of surprise erupted from all around the outer zone of the building. No one could understand how these walkers had bypassed all the defenses set up in the street to prevent them from advancing this far. I told that damn Dimitri that a metal fence was a bad idea. You piece of shit, go tell Dimitri that we're being invaded by walkers, the elderly man in the military uniform barked. Yes, sir. Back at the scene, about 30 men grabbed a series of shields and stood in front of the walkers, ready to take them down without wasting ammunition. Come on, let's get rid of these sacks of meat. The elderly man in the military uniform observed his people's swift movements and nodded in satisfaction. No one in this group was afraid of walkers, and that pleased him. However, something among the horde caught his attention. Among the crowd of walkers, several figures stood still. When he looked closer, his blood ran cold. In the middle of the small horde, about a dozen figures were holding rifles in their hands. Slowly, these rifles were raised and aimed at their enemies. Before anyone realized it, they were ready to open fire. From an unknown location, Jason lifted his radio and said, "Attack team, start eliminating the enemies. They're not all walkers, there are people among them." The voice of the elderly man in the military uniform roared like thunder, and the people lined up to eliminate the walkers were left completely stunned. "What did you say?" However, there was no time to react. From within the crowd of walkers, gunfire erupted. The bullets, like meteorites, tore through the walkers in the middle and roared toward the people preparing to fight them. But as the bullets flew toward them, the people holding ballistic shields in the front managed to block them. Sparks flared instantly as the round struck the metal. Although a single bullet couldn't do much against these sturdy shields, a dense barrage of gunfire rained down, and the ballistic shields in their hands were slowly pushed backward. As they struggled to withstand the bullets in confusion, more than a dozen figures fell to the ground in a mist of blood. In mere seconds, numerous people were taken out without much effort. Meanwhile, the remaining group holding ballistic shields had no choice but to stop and crouch down. They huddled together and immediately began advancing toward the shooters, preparing to return fire. But as the distance closed, the power of the bullets intensified. Although the processed metal shields were tough, they couldn't withstand such a relentless assault, and cracks started to form. Bang! 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 With another barrage, one of the shields failed to withstand the continuous impact, and soon, shrapnel pierced through it. Before many could react, multiple bullets tore through them, and their lifeless bodies collapsed to the ground. Some still clung tightly to their shields even in death. Soon, more people emerged from the building, carrying large ballistic shields draped over their coats, and began counterattacking the enemy. Seeing this, the people among the walkers took a step back, and another line of similarly armored figures covered their bodies to shield them from harm. In this tense standoff, there were now two lines of ballistic shields, one from Dimitri's people and the other from Jason's group. Bullets rained down along the street, cutting down numerous walkers in the crossfire. Everyone inside Dimitri's shelter was bewildered. Walkers had clearly entered their refuge, but how the hell could these walkers be holding weapons? However, someone behind Dimitri's group quickly began giving orders, and soon, they started returning fire against the attack team. Although Dimitri's men held their formation, many were being taken down with precise headshots. Even so, Dimitri's people were clearly well prepared. They began emerging from different sides of the building, and not a single one of them retreated. Just like the suicidal assaults they had launched before. Jason's small group of 12 people clearly couldn't withstand the relentless attack from the large number of enemies pouring out of the building, and they slowly began to fall back. Vehicles started emerging from the underground parking lot of the building, and the machine guns mounted on the trucks opened fire, aiming at the attack team. Just when the situation seemed to be turning in Dimitri's favor, far in the distance. On a building more than 500 meters away, a team of snipers lined up, wielding anti-tank rifles. They took aim at Dimitri's men. Jason gave the order, and the anti-tank rifles unleashed their devastating fire. "My condolences, accept your fate obediently." Following Jason's orders, Elias, leading the sniper team, opened fire from a distance. The large-caliber bullets cut through the air and, upon impact, tore apart both cars and bodies alike, causing chaos within seconds. Boom! 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 The vehicles equipped with machine guns barely lasted a few minutes before being reduced to rubble under the relentless power of the gunfire. Taking advantage of the slight calm in the situation, the advance team, which had remained in cover until then, emerged again and began eliminating enemies still stunned by the attacks coming from all directions. Several grenades from an unknown source were thrown at the enemies retreating towards the building. However, far from panicking, they only furrowed their brows slightly and, despite the pressure, kept gripping their weapons tightly, firing desperately. "Everyone, put on your masks!" The order came suddenly from a commanding voice, and the advance team, under Jason's direct command, paused for a moment to put on their gas masks before continuing with the assault. The gas began to spread slowly around the building's entrance, infiltrating inside where many enemies had been retreating. Within seconds, the smoke started to take effect, weakening those sheltering inside. As the smoke grenades released their lethal contents, the sound of gunfire began to die down. Only those outside, still fighting, continued to shoot. The thick smoke had an immediate impact. The people inside began to suffocate, clutching their throats while coughing uncontrollably. With the air saturated with gas, the visibility for the survivors drastically reduced, and the accuracy of their shots plummeted. It was the perfect moment. Taking advantage of the confusion, the advance team quickened their pace, moving swiftly to take up a much more strategic position. Without losing time, Jason took his radio and ordered firmly, "Jeffrey, the situation outside the building is under control. Have one team enter through the parking lot while another advances through the front door." "Understood." Jeffrey responded immediately. After receiving the confirmation, Jason slowly advanced, ready to join the offensive. With a pistol in hand, he walked with determination while the main group followed closely behind. Without hesitation, they all headed toward the building's entrance to reinforce the advance team. As he advanced, Jason glanced at the shelter that, not long ago, had been in perfect condition. Now, only ruins and destruction remained. And despite being the cause of all this chaos, Jason's expression remained indifferent. Nicholas Gonzalez gripped his light machine gun tightly and, with evident concern, asked, "Sir, won't the sound of the gunshots attract the walkers from the city?" Jason answered calmly, "Don't worry, those walkers won't be a problem." John Sader, who was following closely behind the group, intervened. "Did you see how the advance team walked through the walkers and eliminated most of the people outside the shelter? I never would have thought of an attack method like that. It's terrifying." Billy Fisher nodded upon hearing this. He observed the bodies scattered on the ground without feeling the slightest bit of guilt. To him, those people were despicable. No matter what they had done today, they deserved to die. "Stop thinking about the outcome." Jason interrupted the soldiers who were following him when he noticed some hesitation in the group. "In a moment, you'll see with your own eyes the atrocities these people have committed all this time. And when you do, you won't feel a shred of compassion for them. Don't forget why we're fighting. They wouldn't hesitate to kill us and raid our central base if they had the chance." Knowing Jason was right, John Sader nodded. "Yeah, these bastards don't deserve any pity." As they walked, everyone put on their gas masks and approached the building's entrance. When Jason saw this scene, he looked at the many people lying on the floor. It was obvious they had fallen due to the toxic gas, but if he left them like this, they would definitely turn into walkers. Secure the targets. If they turn into walkers, they could become a problem. With that, Jason aimed his pistol and began shooting each one in the head with no emotion. Bang! Bang! Meanwhile, the advance team had already reached the upper floors without Jason needing to give direct orders. Everyone knew what they had come for, so there was no need for him to give instructions every second. "Sir, this was much easier than we thought," Billy Fisher said with a deep, excited voice. "Don't let your guard down. We might run into a surprise." "Yes, sir." At the top of the building, Dmitri watched the chaos unleashed by the mysterious group that had attacked his shelter. His eyes reflected a mixture of rage and confusion as he saw his men being massacred without being able to do anything to stop it. Boom! Who the hell are these people? Dmitri roared in a hoarse voice, unable to understand how his domain was crumbling so quickly. Beside him, a man dressed in a suit trembled before responding. Sir, the equipment these people have is top-notch. Their distribution and tactics are well planned. This group is anything but ordinary. Dmitri shot him a death glare, his face contorted with fury. Don't give me that crap. Didn't you say there was no other group stronger than us around here? The man swallowed hard before replying, Sir. I warned you that kidnapping the women from the smaller shelters wasn't a good idea. Your decision has condemned us. I knew it was only a matter of time before a stronger group came after us. Before he could finish, a gunshot echoed in the room. Bang! The bullet pierced the head of the suited man, scattering blood and brains on the floor. Dmitri looked at the corpse with an eerily serene expression, as if nothing had happened. Damn useless fools! How long did this place last us? Dmitri muttered with disdain. He hadn't received any reports from his subordinates in a while, and the silence only confirmed the inevitable. He gazed nostalgically at the luxurious shelter that had been his stronghold and, with a nonchalant gesture, grabbed a bottle of wine from a nearby table. In the corner of the room, a group of men moved forward in formation, protected by bulletproof shields and with their weapons ready to fire. Bang! Bang! Two of the guards in the room fell immediately, gunned down within seconds. A swift bullet pierced one of their heads, spraying blood across the carpet. Dmitri narrowed his eyes and, for the first time, his expression showed a hint of unease. Shit! You guys really aren't ordinary people. He muttered with a tense smile while watching the men who had stormed into his sanctuary. Just as the battle at the main gate reached its peak and both sides fought with all their strength, a completely different scene was unfolding in the underground parking lot of the building under attack. The place, dark and damp, lacked any source of light to illuminate it. Rats and insects slid silently across the cold floor, invisible to anyone who wasn't paying attention. Meanwhile, on the surface, the constant gunfire and the thunderous sound of combat focused all attention, turning the parking lot into an unnoticed refuge for Dmitri's people. Aside from the 2 trucks that had been sent out to repel the attack, no one else should have tried to escape, and in theory, the parking lot shouldn't be housing any groups of people. However, at that moment, the reality was quite different. Everyone take cover and keep your eyes open. We need to get inside the building immediately and surprise the enemy. A series of slow footsteps echoed in the underground parking lot of the building, and occasionally, a few scattered voices could be heard. Finally, a loud noise came from the underground door, breaking the silence, and several figures ran toward the parking lot, flashlights in hand. Bang! Bang! In the blink of an eye, 2 silent shots took down those 2 people, and the flashlights fell to the ground, rolling and casting their light on a group of individuals dressed in black tactical suits. They all wore night vision goggles on their helmets and gas masks that concealed their faces. Crack! One of the men from the group approached the 2 fallen victims and, with a swift motion, destroyed the flashlights to extinguish the light still illuminating the parking lot. Around 20 people stood in silence, observing with watchful eyes, showing no emotion at the situation. This was the second attack squad sent by Jason, tasked with securing the 2 entrances of the building and preventing any escape attempts. To ensure the operation's success, all members of the squad were experienced soldiers, recruited by Jason since he left prison with his small group. If he wanted to surpass the CRM, he urgently needed numerous military resources and to secure some bases with top-quality equipment. That's why, outside the prison, Jason had much more power than he had ever imagined obtaining. To facilitate the start of the mission, the night vision goggles were removed, and those carrying ballistic shields opened the way into the building. The leader of this squad was an older man named Jeffrey, a former leader of the refuge who had fallen victim to Dmitri's forces. With a watchful glance around him, Jeffrey gave the order, "All right, we need to get inside the building." Thus, the entire squad, under Jeffrey's command, advanced into the building, beginning to clear the path. The darkness of the facility made it difficult to see the faces of some people, as the electricity had not been restored for some time. In areas without power generators, the building remained completely dark. As they ventured deeper into the place, they encountered several people guarding a door. From the expressions on their faces, the fear they felt was evident. "Excuse me, where's the bathroom?" "What?" Before they could react, the person was caught by 2 shots to the chest. They fell to the floor lifeless within seconds. After confirming that the threat had been neutralized, a man from the group, who had witnessed the shots and was at the front, fired again, this time aiming at the head of the corpse. He firmly pointed out, "Headshots, we shouldn't waste extra ammo on those who will rise as walkers." "Understood. Hurry up. We need to cover more ground to support Jason's group." Noticing some gazes fixed on a door, Dmitri ordered, "Let's quickly check the rooms. If we find prisoners or resources, leave them for now. First, we need to eliminate all enemies. There's no point in saving someone if we can't defeat the enemy first. We need to be quick and effective." As he spoke, Jeffrey moved forward and began clearing the path. Seeing his determination, everyone understood what needed to be done without Jeffrey having to remind them of every detail. They cleared the area quickly. Bang! 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 As they advanced, the enemy's resistance increased, but the strangest thing was that they all seemed to flee in terror, not understanding what was happening. Seeing this scene, Jeffrey frowned slightly but didn't pay it much attention. He continued walking through the cleared hallways and soon encountered several people lying on the ground, struggling to stay conscious. Instead of continuing to move forward, he stopped and allowed those carrying ballistic shields to open the path again. His frown deepened. Bang! 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 "Is everything okay?" Noticing Jeffrey's worried expression, one of Jason's group members couldn't help but ask, a hint of suspicion in his voice. "It seems the situation is different from what I imagined." Jeffrey looked ahead and added, "These people were already injured before we arrived." The others were running in panic. Upon hearing this, the group member smiled ironically and commented, "I guess our leader has already reached the front." This is normal if we consider how lethal he is when facing his enemies. To him, these people are nothing. After a moment of reflection, Jeffrey nodded and replied, "You're right. I didn't know Jason or you all before he brought us into his group. I guess I underestimated his strength from the beginning. So, do we continue clearing the path as planned?" "Yes, we can't let the general situation sway us. We must move faster and uncover everything this place hides." "Understood." In the room where Dmitri had killed his most trusted subordinate, several people had entered without him being able to do anything. Looking at the man in front of him, Dmitri couldn't help but ask, "Are you from the army or something like that?" "No, it doesn't seem like the military is out here facing walkers and destroying shelters these days." Jason, who was sitting in front of Dmitri, smiled calmly and replied, "I can't deny that your people have surprised me, Mr. Dmitri. You see, while you have a very strong group and enough weapons to wipe out my people here 10 times over with ease, your distribution is a mess." Saying this, Jason paused and pointed out, "Well, a recent friend of mine told me that you and your group have done terrible things lately, kidnappings, thefts, murders, and I don't want to imagine what other atrocities you've committed up until today." Dmitri interrupted Jason, looking at him with a cold expression and responded, "Don't come at me with that crap about trying to look like a man of good intentions. Seeing all the people you and your men have killed without hesitation, you're no different than us." Looking at Dmitri's furious expression, Jason tried to discern what made him different from all the others he had faced until that moment. He didn't wait any longer and called someone who was behind him, waiting for them to approach before saying, "Tell me, what did we find in these rooms before we got here?" Billy, who looked at Dmitri with a cold expression, responded, "Imprisoned people, men, women, and children were chained." Upon hearing this, The corners of Jason's mouth lifted slightly. He looked at Dmitri and said, "You see, I'm building a new order from scratch, driven by a noble cause. People like you are the ones I need to eliminate from my path to prevent you from causing me problems." "Ha ha. Then you'll have to kill 90% of the people you find today in this world. No one expects to be saved, and they've learned to survive on their own a long time ago." Dmitri responded with a mocking glance. All I need to do is eliminate some troublesome men, cut off the heads of command, and make sure those who follow me can defend my shelters in this new world." Jason remained unfazed by Dmitri's words. He stood up and walked toward the center of the room. Just as he was about to face Dmitri, the door opened, and an elderly man with a tired expression entered, looking at everyone in the room before saying, "Hello, Dmitri, you miserable bastard. Ah, look who's here. I suspected you were behind all this, Jeffrey." Dmitri's calm voice resonated as Jeffrey entered. Everyone else present stared at the elderly man in silence. For his part, Jason remained calm. He looked at Dmitri, and his eyes shone with an intention that no one could decipher. In a building more than 600 meters from where Jason and his group had entered, the sniper group led by Elias changed their targets to more distant ones. "All right, everyone eliminate the people marked in the report. Don't leave any of them alive," Elias said with a cold expression. So far, everything was going according to Jason's plan. "What do you mean by eliminating the rest of the people in the report? Elias, do you know something I don't?" Anna, who was from Jeffrey's shelter, asked incredulously. Upon hearing this, Elias turned around and said clearly, "We're going to kill 7 targets from your group. Those 7 must die before the night falls." As soon as Elias finished speaking, there was a series of gunshots. Bullets came from the rifles, followed by confirmation calls. "Target eliminated. Cesar was taken down. Michael was eliminated. Mad was eliminated." Seeing Anna's frozen expression, Elias understood that she must have been very surprised. He then said, "You know, we've been watching your group for a long time, long before you were supposedly attacked by Dmitri and his people." Upon hearing this, Anna's body trembled with shock. Her hand slowly moved toward her gun, ready to kill all these people in front of her, and she said, "You damn traitors. You said you'd help us, why are you killing us now?" Elias paused, looked at Anna, and pointed out, "Jeffrey, the leader of your community, made deals with Dmitri to exchange resources and people in exchange for his protection. But when the transaction went wrong for unknown reasons, Dmitri attacked your group, and that's when your leader announced that they had been attacked by a ruthless community. I'm still very surprised. I fully believed the words of that old man, but I never thought he was telling a different story. Luckily, we have a very observant leader who knows what would have happened if it weren't for that, right?" Anna, who heard these words, couldn't believe it and screamed, "You're lying. You and Jason are just like all the other groups, you only seek your own benefit." Just as Elias was about to respond, the radio on his chest began making noise, and then a voice came from the intercom, "ZZ. Unexpectedly, all the cards were gathered in one place. I almost was fooled by your slow words." At that moment, Jeffrey burst into the room where Jason and Dmitri were having a conversation, where they were expressing their indifferences. Everything stopped when he, an uninvited person, entered. Why is this person still alive? Everyone heard the question and immediately looked at Jeffrey with strange expressions. Why the rush to kill him? You seem a bit restless, Jeffrey. I know this person has many of your people captive, but there's no rush to end his life. This situation made everyone, including Jeffrey, feel the calm words of Jason. To outsiders, they were just simple words, but Jason's closest followers knew his intentions, and some immediately left the room. With an unnatural expression, Jeffrey said, "It's not what you think, I just thought there was no need to waste words with this monster." I'm the monster, Jeffrey? I think I understand what you told this group of people. You're truly a damn old liar. Dmitri looked at Jeffrey with a serene gaze, leaned back in his chair, and closed his eyes in annoyance. It was true that Dmitri had done terrible things, he couldn't deny that, but if compared to Jeffrey, perhaps they weren't so different when it came to sins and ambition. Applause! This is truly brilliant. Unexpectedly, all the cards were gathered in one place. I almost was fooled by your slow words. At the same time Jason was clapping, everyone behind him clapped enthusiastically. They all fixed their eyes on the two men in front of Jason. Looking at Jason, who was clapping in an unusual manner, Jeffrey felt something was wrong and said, "Jason, it seems there's a misunderstanding. I can explain." "Ha ha ha, looks like things didn't go as you thought, right, Jeffrey?" Dmitri smiled with satisfaction and said in a cold voice, "Do you really think this man in front of us would swallow all the crap you told him about me? You're done, you damn fool." As if hearing the most feared words, Jeffrey felt a chill run down his body and said, Sir, I don't understand what Dmitri said to you, but he's lying. Can you stop right now?" Upon hearing what Jason said, Dmitri's eyes glistened with anguish and immediately responded, "Yes, I didn't tell you the things as they really happened, but you must understand that it was for you to act and save my people. Enough of the games, Jeffrey. I know you lied to me when you said your group was attacked by Dmitri's group. It's true you were attacked, but not in the desolate situation you mentioned." Jason paused and looked at the two people in front of him. "Jeffrey, I've been watching you for a week, and believe me, I considered approaching you with good intentions, but then the exchange happened. You, apparently, offered Dmitri resources and people to unite forces, but Dmitri smelled that rot and betrayed you at the last moment, am I correct?" Jeffrey's body recoiled in shock. He thought that if he ignored that fact and completely eliminated Dmitri's group, he could hide that past and follow Jason, who seemed to have much more strength and authority than any other group today. He would never suffer again. But now that Jason revealed many of his secrets, it was something that truly shocked him. He didn't know how Jason found out, but it was clear that Jason had been watching everything from the start. Jason's mentality was clear: he would never trust his friends, and even less so his enemies. Since leaving prison, he had been uniting some small groups of people into his own circle. These men, seeking a purpose to keep living, joined him. When Jason gave them a purpose, they all decided to survive and protect others while joining Jason's strength and protecting his plans with dedication. For his part, Jason always knew what he was doing when he approached Jeffrey's group. From his words and those of everyone in that group, few knew that Jeffrey had those plans. Therefore, to ensure no anomalies arose later, all the men with authority within Jeffrey's group would be eliminated. Watching Dmitri and Jeffrey's movements in silence, Jason had no intention of stopping his words. He looked at everyone and said, "Well, that's not important for now. What matters is that, thanks to you, I finally managed to open a second base for my community in this city. Those people you deceived are aware of your actions, and now they follow me. They won't listen to your words. I'm the only one who can tell them what to do and the crap they eat." Jeffrey shouted in a hoarse voice. When the middle-aged man said that, Jason walked toward him, pulled out a knife from his vest, held it by the reverse, and then extended his hand toward Dmitri. "I'm a fair man, you'll take care of who took down your shelter, and I'll take care of you later." Looking at the knife, Dmitri stood up, and before Jeffrey could do anything, the blade of a knife pierced his back. Dmitri's cold voice was heard. "Do you know the satisfaction I'm feeling right now, you damn old demon?" "Ah. You? Damn demon, I?" Before Jeffrey could finish his words, a bullet pierced his forehead, and then the same bullet pierced Dmitri's neck. Seeing that everything was calm, Jason walked toward Dmitri, who was still agonizing, extended his hand, and took the knife. "The problematic people have been eliminated. Trust me, I'll make good use of this place." Just as everything seemed resolved, Jason turned his head toward the men behind him and said, "Everyone head to this place. We need to start cleaning up all the mess we made to make it livable for the people." "Understood, sir." Everyone began to move as orders were issued. Jason walked to the glass windows and looked outside the building with a cold gaze. Now the cards were on the table. He had managed to gather a lot of people and a shelter that, slowly, would be remodeled. But he still wondered if it was a good idea to begin taking over the city of Atlanta.
Am I rushing too much?
No, everything is going according to plan. It won't be long before we return. Jason smiled with satisfaction. Now, all these people in the city would be led with fairness. Anyone who didn't want to join would be eliminated. There couldn't be multiple leaders in a single city. Time flies. The night faded in a sigh. The first ray of sunlight broke the darkness, announcing the dawn and the start of a new day. But the light did not illuminate a peaceful landscape of grass and trees swaying in the wind, but a field of blooded corpses in the middle of the city, flames still crackling, and survivors fighting for their lives against the walkers who wanted to eat them. "Piss off," someone roared amidst the chaos. Weapons flashed with every strike, taking down the undead drawn by the noise of the battle. Jason, who had been fighting relentlessly all night, raised his machete and plunged it into the skull of a walker. Black blood splattered on the ground, but he didn't stop. With every swing, with every movement, he kept eliminating more. Panting, Jason lifted his gaze. The streets were devastated, but the flow of walkers had stopped. Finally, his group had managed to clear the refuge. Exhaustion weighed heavily on everyone. Some could go no further and collapsed to the ground, drained of energy. Others rushed to help them, pouring a bit of water for them to catch their breath. "Get everything ready to move out," Jason ordered, his voice hoarse from exhaustion, then added, "We need to seal off the street before more of those bastards get in." No one protested. The only option was to move forward. Although the battle in the city had ended, Jason knew the fight outside was still ongoing. They couldn't let their guard down. Besides, with the noise they had made, staying there any longer was an invitation to disaster. Jeffrey's group, who had been holding back the walkers for hours, was on the brink of collapse. They all needed a rest, and it was only a matter of time before they would lower their guard. Still, the survivors from the surrounding areas forced themselves to stay on their feet. They helped each other, called out to their companions, and, staggering, hurried toward the building's entrance, dodging the bodies scattered across the ground. "Sir! Please, I need help." The scream tore through the air and caught everyone's attention. Jason turned just in time to see a man clutching his neck desperately. He approached immediately, his stomach tightening in anticipation. When the man moved his hand from his shoulder, the mark of a bite was exposed. Jason sighed, gritting his teeth. "I understand," he said calmly, though his eyes told another story. "It's okay, friend. But tell me, was at least the one who bit you sexy?" The attempt at humor hung in the air, heavy. No one laughed. The man heard Jason's words and, despite the tears rolling down his face, managed a faint smile. "Sir, I've lost my family," the man said in a trembling voice. "But when I heard you speak in that speech, something inside me awoke. I just wanted to live long enough to help you fulfill your goals." He paused, breathing deeply to contain his emotions. "I truly admire you for having your goals so clear. It's been an honor, sir. Thank you for letting me follow you into this hell." Then, with a firm gaze, he turned to Jason. "It would be an honor to die by your hands. Please, help me with this, sir." The atmosphere turned cold. Everyone who heard those words felt a chill run down their spines. No one had to say it out loud. A bite on the arm or leg might mean amputation as a last resort. But one on the shoulder left no room for hope. Elias arrived with Jeffrey's group, his somber expression hardening as he saw the scene. Among them was Anna, who, after hearing what had happened, decided to follow them. She looked around silently, trying to absorb what was happening, until she finally understood when she saw the man's bloody shoulder. Jason sighed and, without rushing, drew his weapon. He walked toward the man with steady steps, embraced him with a reassuring smile, and whispered, "You know, I've always wished this scene would never repeat since I became leader. But the fact that you're asking for help right now, Means that, in some way, I'm doing my job right. The man rested his head on Jason's chest, feeling an unexpected peace in his leader's voice. Yes, sir, he whispered, closing his eyes. Everyone expected the shot to come quickly. But Jason remained silent. Seconds passed, then more, until he finally spoke softly. Tell me, Eric, when is your birthday? Who? Eric was surprised that Jason knew his name. He had only expected to be killed as quickly as possible, but at the question, he was stunned and thought carefully about when his birthday was. May 13th. Bang! The bullet left the barrel of Jason's gun. Standing so close to Eric, he was splattered with blood on his face. With a calm look, Jason didn't let Eric's body fall to the ground. In the final moment, under the surprised gazes of everyone, Jason held Eric's body and gently lowered it to the floor. The hot blood from his face slid away, and with an empty expression, Jason muttered softly, "It's been a long time since all of this began." Jason paused, letting his words linger in the air. Then, he looked up at the others and locked eyes with each one of them. Remember my words. The dead do not suffer death. It is we, the living, who mourn the deaths of our loved ones, our friends, our brothers. After saying this, Jason closed his eyes for a moment, as if absorbing the weight of his own words. Then, he fixed his gaze on Anna and continued, "If you choose to keep fighting, I will open the way for you, as far as my life will go. I will be the one to make the hardest decisions, to prevent this from happening again." Eric's death is a symbol. It showed us that we can still fight for our future. It taught us that death is not a punishment, but a reward. Will you continue fighting in the name of all those who are no longer with us? Although it seemed like everything had ended, Jason knew this was just the beginning. The place needed to be kept safe, and it wasn't going to be easy. Death would continue to be part of their lives, but he was ready to face it. He needed to be a good leader, one who, despite defeats and losses, would never let his group fall. A leader with an unbreakable will. The crowd remained in absolute silence. Jason watched them for a moment longer before turning and walking into the building. Just before entering, he stopped and turned back to them. One day, it will be us who die. But until that day comes, we must remain calm and have our weapons ready to defend ourselves. Anna stepped forward, determination in her eyes. We will continue fighting. We will follow you wherever we go, by your side. Jason smiled faintly, appreciating the firmness in her words. As I thought, you are a strong and determined woman. Reorganize your people to clean up this place. Very soon, we'll begin to expand from here. There's a lot of work to do. Lost in thought about everything that had happened, Jason turned back to the crowd. Keep your heads up. There are still many people who will need our help later. Yes, sir. The response was unanimous, firm, and full of purpose. Good. With a confirmation, Jason entered the building and walked again toward the room where Dimitri and Jeffrey's bodies rested on the cold floor. He glanced at his own reflection in the window, and his appearance now was terrifying. Covered in blood and pieces of flesh on his boots and body, Eric's blood on his face, and an expression that showed his most indifferent side. This time, Jason felt something heavy in his chest, something he could barely express, but his present self prevented it. How far have we come, though? Jason murmured with a faint smile, raised the weapon in his hand, and aimed at his head before closing his eyes. One shot, and it all ends. You won't suffer, you won't face criticism, and you won't have to kill your followers before they turn into walkers. As he thought this, Jason opened his eyes and threw the weapon onto a desk. Just then, after a bit of regret, he smiled as if what he'd done were a joke. He walked toward Dimitri's body and searched through his things out of sheer curiosity, only to discover he had nothing. When he looked down, he found an old radio and then took the microphone, pressing it out of mere curiosity. ZZ. Hello, my name is Jason, and right now I just want to be alone. Is there anyone out there who can hear me and share a moment of peace? ZZ. Hearing the silence coming from the radio, Jason smiled bitterly and thought, how am I supposed to get a response? However, the next moment, a female voice came through the intercom, and although the sound was crackling, he could hear it clearly. ZZ. Hello, I'm Alicia. Jason's eyes brightened, and he spoke again, ZZ. Hello, Alicia, how's life treating you in this world full of the undead? Not bad, at least I no longer have to worry about anything other than surviving with my loved ones.
What's your situation?
Without wanting to discuss anything else, both parties began to share the things they had experienced in this world and what they thought would happen next. After some time, Jason slowly lost the connection with the other side, and before it happened, he said, "Note this radio channel. If I'm ever near your signal, I'll be able to help you. ZZ. We may never see each other's faces. What's the point of holding on to something like that?" Alicia asked with a voice full of laughter. Who knows? Maybe one day we'll meet, anything can happen. Before Jason could finish his words, the radio lost the connection. Just as Jason was about to help the others with their work, a voice came out again from the static on the desk. Hello, this is Sergeant Raul Mendez. I lead a squad of over 90 soldiers and hundreds of civilians. We need help from anyone who's listening. When Jason heard these words, he grabbed the radio and said, "This is Captain Jason. Tell me your location. We have a safe place. You can trust me."
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.